Call to order the Cabrillo Unified School District Governing Board meeting. Today is September 12th, 2019. Thanks everybody for being here. So we took no action in closed session. Okay, we will start with item 6, Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 7, adoption of the agenda as presented or amended. We have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes 5 plus 1 to 0. All right, item 8, student staff community recognition. No items this month. So we move on to item 9, comments from the public related to items not on this agenda. Give me a second to check. We have one from Smita Gunda Uhala. Please tell me if I spelled it, if I said it wrong. And I will say one quick reminder for folks who are not familiar with our processes per California law. We invite folks from the community to come and share with us comments that they might have. We typically try to stick to 3 minutes or less, but by law we're not permitted to respond. So if we look at stone cold silent, it's not because we're cold or stone. So please proceed.
Good evening. Good evening, board members. My name is Smitha Gundavajala. I work as a program coordinator with the Youth Leadership Institute in San Mateo. We serve all of San Mateo County. I want to speak to you tonight about climate change education as an important part of our change, as an important part of our response to climate change efforts. I wanted to share that the County of San Mateo has an effort called Climate Ready SMC that has subcontracted the City of Half Moon Bay to get community input on a climate action and adaptation plan, and specifically to get input from 3 priority populations, and that is young people, seniors, and non-English speakers, especially Spanish speakers. So the Youth Leadership Institute wants to kind of offer to do education in schools so that we can use not only this as an input opportunity on the climate action and adaptation plan, but to really build capacity and share information with our young people about climate change, which is a topic that impacts them deeply and more so now than ever. And I wanted to propose also that we're able to do a youth summit, and I'm happy to work with you all to figure out what that would look like, but it would incorporate schools, all the middle and high schools in the district. And I would also love to talk to you about ways to incorporate some of the homeschooled students who aren't physically on a campus as well. If we can hold a date for all of the folks in the district, we've thought about a model of having maybe 2-hour assembly style sessions in the MU or the gym, where we could share kind of basic climate change information, lead them through a series of activities, kind of connecting it to their own experience and making it feel really relevant for them, and then also letting them know that they have an opportunity to give input on this climate action and adaptation plan, which will be the playbook for how the City of Half Moon Bay will address climate change for the next 10 years. So I think that while we are being subcontracted by the city and county to offer this to y'all, I hope that we are able to partner in some ways. And I look forward to hearing from you what that might look like. Thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you. Sean.
Point of order, again, the board will not respond to public comments directly, but I can tell the board that I would be happy to work with that individual who just spoke, and we can explore ideas together. If they will just contact me, I would be able to direct them to staff here, and we could work with them.
Thank you very much, Sean. Since there are no more comments from the public related to items not on this agenda, We will move to item number 10, representative reports, starting with CUTA. I see a few of you here today.
Thank you.
Oh, there it is. Good evening, board members, Superintendent Dr. McFetrich, and all of those in attendance. I have to say, Dr. McFetrich, that I practice your name over and over. As an English learner, I had to do that, so so be thankful. I would like to start by saying, by thanking all board members for setting time aside to meet with Heidi and I to discuss current issues affecting all of us here at Cabrillo Unified. Thank you so much. We understand that the district is going through challenging times, and cuts will most likely be happening all over the district. Cabrillo serves about 3,200 students, pre-K all the way to grade 12. So let's remember to put students first. In order to serve our students, we need to make sure our educators and staff members are being taken care of. How can you accomplish that? A fair and competitive salary is a good start. Many educators, including myself, have a second job to compensate for the cost of living in the area. Many of us have roommates because we just can't afford to rent our own place. Many educators live with their parents for the same reason. I can go on and on, but I am sure you're already aware of the struggles. One last thing before I allow Heidi to speak. Today is day 74 without a contract. I ask you to go back to the negotiating table and let's continue with the negotiations. Thank you.
I'll be short and brief. I, again, want to echo Ramon's thoughts. Thank you for meeting with us. We've also met with Dr. McFetrich and Dr. Wade, and I feel like we have had some really nice, productive meetings, opening the dialogue, opening the conversation, keeping things open and honest, constructive, but transparent. And I think that's the only way we can move forward to solve the future. We know circumstances are tough, but we also know that if we work together, we can come up with solutions that are going to hopefully keep everybody employed and happy. I left Tuesday night from the library really with two completely different emotions. One, a lot of doom and gloom from the report, and I know we're going to hear a lot of that again today. But I was also really inspired and happy by the community support that we're feeling. And I look around and I see lots of parents and I see lots of Red for Ed. Not just the teachers are now wearing Red for Ed, but students, families. It's become a real community push because everybody wants to solve the same problem. So please, we ask you to work with us. Let's meet again and let's move forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both. All right, CSCA. CSCA here today? Going once, going twice. Okay. We'll move on to item 11, reports, information, and presentations. Item 11A, received 2018 to 19 unaudited actuals financial report. Jim.
Sorry, a little technical. This evening, I'm going to present to you the audited actuals as to where we ended up last year. We closed our books. Oh, thank you. We closed our books just a few weeks ago, and it's called the unaudited actuals until the auditors have a chance to look at the numbers and verify, which they'll do and bring to you in December on that. I'm also going to talk about the deficit issue this year that we're starting off with. I'm sure this will be an ongoing at all the board meetings probably now through the end of the year, but give you a little more in-depth detail on that as we move forward. So quickly, some of the areas I'm going to cover tonight is the deficit and ending balance, deficit for this year, ending balance from last year, changes to the budget, what's different from last year's actuals to this year's budget on it. Then go through the audited actuals for last year, for the general fund and for all the other funds, and a little bit of a comparison along the way too on it. So I know the numbers are small, especially if you're out in the audience here this evening, but the size of our problem for this year is quite large on it. If you look at the last couple lines on the bottom of this page, there's minimum cuts which are qualified. If we go to that level, like the 1.7, that will eat up pretty much most of the available funds, and if the numbers change, we could actually be in pretty serious trouble on that. The recommended level, which gets us back to a positive status, right now in a qualified status, but to get back to a positive, which is a normal status for a school district, is about $2.5 million on it. And if the parcel tax doesn't pass in November, it'll be 4.2. The budget cuts usually come off the unrestricted side of the general fund. And if you put this into percentages, the 2.5 is about 10% of the unrestricted general fund, and the 4.2 is probably around 18%, which is a really high number for a district to have to cut. Some of the changes that we're seeing that's causing this deficit in the budget is salaries. We have salary schedules that go up every year. Step and column as staff move up through the levels of the salary schedule. We're processing that right now. We don't have those numbers. We'll have those for you at another update. The retirement programs that we offer here in the districts, STRS and PERS, has raised our budget about $107,000, which is actually a good year. The state actually stepped in with some funding for this year to bring those rates down. But probably, if that didn't happen, we'd probably in the $400,000 range increase for this year. Health benefits are going up. We just heard the other day a little over 7% for Kaiser. Anthem, we don't have a real hard number on right now. We're assuming the same, but then we also just heard, I think it was yesterday, that they're going to drop the Anthem plan for next year. And so they're looking for an alternative right now to replace it with. So I don't know if that means more or less, but we'll see as we go forward on that. Last year we got about $600,000 in one-time funding, $567, I'm sorry, in one-time funding. And that wasn't carried over to this year, it was a one-time only. So when we get to the unaudited actuals, it's showing us with actually a little surplus at the end of last year, but if you consider the one-time funds weren't there, and the raise we just had with CSEA, if that would have occurred in last year, which is the year was negotiated instead of being paid in this year, our deficit, we really had a deficit last year about $700,000 if you take those two numbers into consideration on the books. So you can see there's been a progression here. We're $700,000 last year. This year we're up to about 2.5 on it. These are some of the key areas that have gone up. There's other areas as well. Special education, of course, is increasing. The costs for the special ed students keep going up on that. Having declining enrollment is our biggest number right here. And as we decline, we of course lose revenue in the district. We don't have those students as we're funded on 80 attendance of the students on it. So as their numbers go down, our major funding source goes down. And actually we have less free and reduced students in our programs, and we're funded, we get supplemental funding from the state as part of our formula, and it's based largely on free and reduced. There's some other areas in there, but free and reduced is the largest area, and that's been declining for the last few years on it. As the economy, there's more jobs, less people on the free and reduced program, and so that's actually hurting our bottom line dollars as well on here. Now these are going to be even worse if you're in the audience trying to read along here. This is our well, I'll just go through the columns here. There's 6 basically columns of numbers. The first 3 is the audited actual. It breaks it down to unrestricted, restricted, and total. The other side is the budget, and I'm going to sort of stay away from that because that's what you approved back in June, and I'm not going to go over those numbers again. But in here, let's actually hit a couple key points in here. There is some adjustments. One of them, the county gave us, actually the state gave us right when we were closing the books. So if you look at the state revenue, and I actually look at it this year against last year was higher on it, and that's due to a one-time adjustment. The state made us post at the end of the year about 1.4 million to CalPERS. They actually increased our revenue by 1.4 and increased the employee benefits by 1.4. It's an offsetting adjustment in the books, but it makes the numbers look a little odd when you look between the years on here. And that's just an accounting error. We're going to actually make that same posting in the current year when we do the next update to the budget on it. Let's see. In the budget also, of course, between this year and next year, let me see if I can find some other here. Well, actually on the next page, let me go to that. That's probably the more one. So the circle in the blue up at the top of the page is about $199,000. That's a surplus. That's what I was talking about a little bit before earlier. If you took out that one-time funding, and if we gave the raise for last year, which we ended up paying in this year, but if we would have paid it in last year, that number would have been a negative $700,000 in last year. And then if you look across to our budget line, it's about 1.7, I believe, million deficit for this year, and then of course we're projecting 2.5 for next year, and that's why we're going to be talking down the road about how to manage that as we move forward on there. The other line I marked on here is our ending fund balance of is around 4.5. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on. These extra small numbers on there. Yeah, about 4.5 million. That's a number you'll see also reflected in some of the other slides this evening. And that's where we ended as our fund balance for last year. Part of that goes to, we have to maintain a 3% reserve. The rest of that, as we move into next year, if of course it's dropping down the numbers, and then the year after, if nothing changes, it would go negative on it. And that's the year we're having the extreme deficit problems. If we do a little comparison of how the budget progressed this year through the various stages, so on this report is the adopted budget that you did probably in June of 2018. Then there's a revised budget that was probably updated sometime in the spring of this year on it, and then the unaudited actuals, which is the third column. And the fourth column compares the second to the third column and for differences. So on here we had quite a bit of change in the contributions column, and that's why I highlighted in yellow there, about 492,000, I think it is, on there. And that was largely caused by a couple items. The amount of deficit we expected in food service wasn't as great last year. Our food service program runs at a loss, and the general fund picks up the difference. The amount that was budgeted was around 300,000. I think it came in around 130,000 loss on it. So that wasn't as big, so we didn't have to get as large a contribution over to the food service program last year. The other was special education. We projected, I think it was around 5.6, and it came in less on the special ed side. Some of the cost, we have to project out for the students we send out of the district a full cost, assuming they're going to school every day. And if they don't attend it every day, we get a little bit of a discount. That occurred during the year, so we ended up having some funds at the end of the year left over in there from special ed on it. Also, certificated salaries, and we're analyzing that right now. It came in over what was budgeted. Not the adopted budget was actually higher than what the actuals were, but the revised budget was lower on that. So we're going back and looking at how the revised budget was developed. It's obvious, it looks like something was missed, is my guess, in there when they put it together. So it ended up costing us more on classified salaries than we projected back in the early part of the year on that. And then the benefit changes, Medical costs seem to come in higher than we projected as well, so we have to go back and look at that as possibly related with the salaries, if they missed some salaries in the revised budget. Also probably missed the benefits, the health benefits as well on there. So again, then I highlighted the $199,000 difference, which you just saw in the other report, so you can see some similarities between the numbers as they cross over between these various reports on it. And then we have the other funds of the district. So we have quite a bit of other funds in the district. Some have probably been depleted for a while, some spend down pretty close at the end of the year. Of course, the building fund here, there was a bond sale last year, and so there's quite a bit of money in the building fund right now, and that'll go down as projects progress through the year. Capital Facility Fund, that's our developer fee fund, it's also known as we collect on developments around the district, give a fee to the school district. And then the Bond Interest and Redemption Fund, that one is out of our control. It's controlled by the county of San Mateo. When they collect interest on property bills, taxes, principal and interest, it goes into a fund and then they pay off the bonds as they come due on it. So they just give us these numbers, excuse me, for the bond interest and the redemption fund. We don't really control it at all, though. It's controlled by the county. The rest of the funds, Special Reserve Fund is a fund that's been sitting out there, I think, for quite a while. And one of the ones we had, our cafeterias, our food service fund, it maintains a small balance at the end of the year. Child development is a preschool fund, and then adult ed is adult ed, of course, on there.
Mr. Crawford, can you clarify for the public, can the building fund, capital facilities fund, or bond interest and redemption fund be used for this problem, or is that only for facilities?
Yeah, so when the voters approve the bond funds, it's specifically for buildings and construction, purchasing land, so forth. It cannot be used for administrators, teachers, anything that's not directly related with construction on it. So it's a very limited fund, and it can't go between the general fund and the building fund. It's all has to be monitored there. We have a special audit done every year, actually 2 audits done on the bond fund, and those go to you and the oversight committee, who has to watch those funds closely. And I think that's it. Is there any questions, any specifics? I know the report is very big. It's probably about 150 pages. We didn't want to, of course, present it, and you can't even see the numbers too well on the screen anyways on these reports. A lot of detail, a lot of information. I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have them.
Hi, thank you. I know it's a lot to put together. The question I have is coupling this presentation with our presentation of projections from last month, and the fact that we had the county here. And we now have an oversight function from the county.
Right.
Until we are in a position that we can demonstrate we will have that 3% reserve. The cuts are that we need to make this year for next year, even if the parcel tax passes, is
2.5
million.
would get us back to positive status.
Okay.
On that. If we went any lower, we'd be unqualified, so the county would still be going through the review and watching us and pushing us to get it back to positive.
Okay,
Can
so
I
it's
just-
just, so I just wanted to clarify, because I know we've got a lot of people that I'm seeing in the audience tonight that weren't necessarily here last month, and so just to understand that going forward, our baseline goal would be to make those cuts.
And it might
next
increase
year.
as well, actually, along the way, because our next step, since we got last year's closeout, is go back and rebuild this year's budget.
Okay,
And things have changed over the summer. We know actual count of students now. We have all our teachers hired. So we go back in and we rebuild it from scratch, basically, the budget, build it out again. And we're already seeing some numbers coming in higher. So my anticipation is that 2.5 is going to go up over the next few months. And I can't give you a number though at this point.
And I just want to ask on the flip side, because the adjustments that you show here on slide 3 of page 11 includes an admin or confidential raise for the prior year and the current year. So that's not something that we've agreed to or even discussed, as relevant as a board. So if we were to discount all these numbers for that, that would be like 220 off for this year, 110 off for either scenario in the subsequent year. So that 1.7 is really more like 1.4. Am I interpreting that?
Yeah, it would come down,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, it might go up for different reasons, but I just want to clarify. That's the one item looking at the adjustments in the classified raise for the prior year and current year, of course, is what we're going to be asked to vote on later today. So, and then I have a question related to that as well. So the change in, or kind of the increases in the deficit, as it were, that we're seeing from the last financial update, the data from June 6th, third in room. Is that driven then by these adjustments and or changes because of the actuals versus the budget? Or what are those, because the adjustments seem to, if I just kind of add up the numbers that you have there on slide 3, for this year, it's 700, which is really probably less than that. Yeah, perfect, thank you. That first column, 1920, it'll be like roughly 2 and 1.5. So 2 and 1. So it's roughly 5 for this year, because you don't have 2 years of admin. And then roughly 3. I guess if you were to calculate from your numbers as you have them here, like that's like $1 million for the first 2 years, which you show here. So it's about the difference from what the numbers we were looking at in our board meeting in August. So is there also a big gap in the actuals versus the budget?
Is there,
Does that make sense?
so these numbers weren't projected into the budget before, these are new.
Right. So these are adjustments, I get that, I guess, but like
Yeah.
I'm saying, if these 2 years of adjustments adds up to like $700K for the first column and $300K for the second, for next year.
Okay.
First, that's $1 million.
Mhm.
So that's $1 million off the qualified status is about 750, which is the number we were looking at in August. So does that, so, because I'm assuming that the numbers we're looking at in August, I'm pretty sure we're based on going back to qualified, not going back to positive status. I'm
That's
assuming.
possible.
Yeah,
Yes.
so to me, those numbers line up, which means, like, my second corollary question is, does that mean and/or do you have other data that says that there's not a big difference between actuals and budget for that year, for 18-19? Because I guess what we looked at before was like the comparison year to year.
Yeah, there's not a, well, if you come in, we came in at 199 positive for the end of the year, so that's pretty close. I would
Okay.
assume the target was
Yeah,
probably
just-
0 on it. That's what most districts shoot for every year, coming in balanced on it. So, yeah, but there were certain highs and lows throughout the budget and the
They net out.
actuals, and they netted out, yeah.
And the reason I'm drilling into this is to understand like where the change is coming from, and it sounds like it's coming mostly from these adjustments, some of which may not happen, and some of the main drivers being the classified raise, which was not negotiated until after that update.
It didn't get
Is that
processed
correct?
until the new year,
Yeah.
basically, on it.
Okay.
So that threw it out of last year's, and that's why it's showing 2 on here. It was 3% last year, and then that carries over into this year, basically. It's not another 3 on top of it, it's just a carrying through
Yeah, like
process.
continues, that makes
Continues
sense.
through, yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, so then for the qualified status, that's assuming that, like, basically we get 1 year on track, that's the definition, right? Or may or may not have, I guess may or may not have future budget balancing. And then for the second, the positive status would mean, like, our current year plus 2 years, so that's why it's a much bigger number, correct?
Well, it's been accumulating and building and been adding on to it, and the number's just getting bigger and bigger because there's more expenses than there is revenue, I guess is a simple way of putting it on it. And so we have to bring the expenses, mainly bring the expenses down or increase the revenue to bring it back to balance. Increasing the revenue is extremely difficult in school districts because we're pretty locked in. So it's usually reducing the expenditures of the district.
I have another question, if anyone else does too. So for the next slide, slide 4, the changes to the budget for this year compared to last year's actuals. So far this is 1.3 million increase in costs, but it's going to be more because of step and column.
And possibly some other things coming
And
along.
possibly some other like smaller line items, but that will accumulate to be more. So in other words, I guess what I'm saying is like, this is like, well, loss of revenue or increased cost for like the same thing from last year, basically like health benefits. Basically the same as it was last year, yet the costs went up 126,000. Retirement, same thing, you're providing retirement contributions for your employees, cost goes up 107,000.
Yeah, but that's because the increase, the amount we're paying per employee is going up,
Exactly.
not because we have more employees or a
Exactly.
larger salary.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the simple cost for the same thing has gone up.
Right.
Okay, so we're looking at least 1.3, and I guess you don't have a ballpark for the step and column. Hard to say.
You know, it's hard to say. I don't know the history behind it, how many, and we also usually figure in, we look at leaves and retirements maybe as part of that calculation to get a more accurate number, and we just don't have it calculated because we haven't rebuilt this year's budget to really have a target to work against.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Good. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, with that, we'll move to item 11B, receive financial overview update. Sean?
Thank you. So many people would see that some of these slides are in a way a repeat of the framing that we provided Tuesday night at Half Moon Bay Library when we had our community discussion about funding and that type of thing. So I think it is important that we repeat that. I do want to point people to YouTube where they can see Tuesday night's presentation. It was like 2 hours. We have over 100 people attend. And we just want to try to get the word out as much as possible about the impact of the numbers and what we will be doing about it based on what Mr. Crawford said. The objective of this presentation is to provide the board and public with a financial overview update, and we will be doing this on a regular basis. There was mention of the county office coming to us in August, and they are here with us again tonight. I want to welcome and thank Denise Porterfield and her colleagues for coming tonight. And they met with us before this board meeting with Cabinet to talk about sort of our progress in looking at ways that we could use the county to help us through this problem. We will outline a planning process in the months ahead for board consideration of budget cuts so that critical inputs may be incorporated in an effective and efficient manner. I think it's important that everybody understand that we will be going and doing a road show, if you will, that we will be going school by school, talking to different organizations. Last Tuesday was one way to start doing that, and we will be bringing gradually information over and over again to the board and to different members of the public. So again, tonight you've got this background, the financial update, which you heard a little bit about just a little bit ago. Summary and key upcoming decisions, how things will happen and how we'll get to the December deadline, and the decision-making process and timeline. So this background is similar to what I presented on Tuesday night and what I presented last month. We've discussed this numerous times. K-12 education funding is inadequate and underfunded in California, and that there is a lot of increased statewide advocacy for full and fair funding of public schools. When you hear people talk about Assembly Bill 39, Maritsuchi, and aspirational targets for local control funding formula, but there's also ongoing state budget fiscal prudence, and many districts are struggling as a result of inadequate funding, and that a lot of people call this the silent recession. I would urge and encourage everybody to look on do an internet research and look under West Ed under the word silent recession, and you'll hear a lot of the reasons why that is happening now. So many districts rely on local parcel tax measures, Cabrillo Unified is not different in that regard. We rely on a local parcel tax measure for $1.6 million. That is a renewal tax that's coming up that this board voted on in August to put back on the ballot as a staff member. And I also want to just remind all staff members that we cannot advocate for or against the parcel measure on district time or using district resources, but I can give you information. And as you've heard in the previous discussion, the parcel tax measure, what is going to be known as Measure I on the November ballot, represents $1.6 million. There are, as a renewal tax, there continues to be exemptions for seniors, for exemptions with people with disabilities, contiguous parcel exemptions, and the money goes toward operational funds, but not to administrators, and it doesn't go to Sacramento, et cetera, et cetera. So Cabrillo does rely on that local parcel tax measure, and as I think you've heard before, you're looking at a $2.5 million cut that we have to present to the county in December, that we have actionable cuts that the board would vote on in December, that we could institute next year for the following year. And if the parcel tax didn't pass, of course, that would be an additional $1.6 million to go probably to $4.1 million. Again, in the local context, there are many parcel taxes in San Mateo County that are much larger than Cabrillo Unified's, but this board did vote, as per polling, to vote for 150 renewal parcel tax. Tonight's presentation on unaudited actuals showed that we forecast significant budget gaps as reserves have diminished because our costs continue to outpace revenues for a host of reasons. I don't think I have to revisit that. Mr. Crawford, our interim CBO, was very clear on that. And at the minimum, we know that we need budget stabilization. That's a midterm financial solvency strategy, and it's a plan for budget cuts that must be made so that the San Mateo County Office of Education can show that we will remain solvent, can cover our costs, and will not use their authority to potentially do a takeover. I think the pie chart is always interesting for a visual learner, the money in and the money out. You heard Mr. Crawford say the same thing that I say. In short, our expenses exceed our revenues. You'll see the money in coming in. You will see that it's over there, the revenues total, and this is from last year's numbers, but it's good for illustration here. $36 million approximately, and the money out is $37,446,000. So you can see even in that projection, you had more expenses than you did revenues. And I want to just point out on the money out piece, 82% of that is spent on employee salaries and benefits. So when you're talking about budget cuts, at the end of the day, you are going to invariably, inevitably, be making to make that sort of scale of cut. It will affect employees, their livelihoods, their salaries. There will be layoffs. So this is, I think, an important slide. It's one I shared on Tuesday about a financial planning process overview and what we're proposing to the board and the public as a process for decision making so that we have responsible planning and implementation. First of all, I think it's identifying the decision maker. Ultimately, this will be a decision by the Board of Education. And I and my staff will be the ones who will recommend budget cuts to help us balance the budget, and we have to do that by December 2019, or we risk the county and fiscal crisis management assistance team making us do other things and showing that we can do this. So that is our goal. We're gathering inputs. We had our first, community conversation on this on Tuesday night. I have met with CUTA, and thank you to Heidi and Ramon in mentioning that. I've met with their representatives. I've met with CSEA representatives in the last couple of weeks. Parent-teacher organization representatives, I have scheduled at least one PTO meeting, but I will want to meet with other parent-teacher organizations to talk through the same kind of situation. Community groups of varying kind, whether it be, going to a district English language advisory committee or going to Rotary to discuss this. I had a meeting this week with Chamber of Commerce and with the Big Lift Committee. So we are meeting with different community groups. I went and spoke to Michelle Dragony of Coastside Buzz, I'll be speaking Jim Henderson from KHMB. Did I get that right? Those call letters, KHMB? Okay, so we'll be talking in the public about this, and ultimately, we will be referring with the county office and the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team about standards and best practices to get us there. And again, we are meeting monthly, if not bi-weekly, with the county office representatives, and they are coming to all our board meetings. About assessing and deciding, again, there is a recommendation based on staff presentations to the board over the next few months about our existing resources and the district needs and proposals for budget cuts. And then the decider is the Board of Education as elected representatives in the community. Communicating the what and the why. Again, we will work in these board meetings and other venues to explain budget cut decisions and rationale over the months ahead in October, November, and December. And then implementation. Ultimately, and I think this is the most important thing, everybody has got to come to understand that, again, our expenses exceed our revenues. And it has caught up to the district, and we must make these cuts by December or risk losing control of the district. And if there was county takeover, then you would risk no longer having local control and no longer having democratically elected representatives who make these decisions, but instead having somebody else make those decisions, and then being required to take a loan that historically you've seen other districts when they do this, it takes them many years to pay back those loans. So ultimately, everybody needs to understand that there is a need for budget cuts. The numbers do not lie, and the district, to remain solvent, will have to make those cuts. So you'll see here laid out sort of in a Gantt chart format, sort of a calendar, September, October, November, et cetera, et cetera. This is how we get the short-term budget cut proposals presented for board approval, communicated to the community, and then work continuing to implement those cuts. In September, of course, this is preparing with a financial overview update and a planning process to accompany the presentation on unaudited actuals. That's what you're getting right now. You'll see at the bottom it says San Mateo County Office of Education and FCMAT consultation and oversight. And again, we thank our county office counterparts for being here and witnessing this. October, assessing and consulting. We are looking at resources now, closing the budget. We are reviewing and sort of checking the validity of proposed cuts that were made by a committee of individuals in the past. I want to reconvene that committee and look at the cuts list and then start, getting the information out to the board in October, as it says, and gathering inputs ongoing for a proposal on those budget cuts. In November, you'll see a discussion. Again, if the parcel tax passes, that's 1.6 million we don't have to cut. If it fails, it's 1.6 million additional we'd have to cut, taking us from $2.5 million in recommended cuts to $4.1 million. So basically in November, we would analyze those parcel tax election results. I think there is some question about whether or not we should reschedule a board meeting so that we could have a board meeting after and know the parcel tax election results in November. And there would be a preliminary report on the short-term budget cuts ahead in November. And then in December, basically the board is asked, we would provide a recommendation of actionable cuts that are required by San Mateo County Office of Education, and we would continue our efforts to inform the community and stakeholders of those budget cuts, and we would continue to analyze how do we affect those, how do we implement those. You'll see that in January and March. And there would be detailed work to implement the plan, to give layoff notices. Now, I want to speak about this a little bit. What everybody should come to understand also is that we will make a plan in December, and then in January, the governor, as happens every year, will lay out a budget. And he may say, oh, but wait, there's more. We're going to give you more money. But the truth of the matter is, that always happens in the budget cycle. The governor says, oh, we're going to give you more money, and then you get to May, and there's a switcheroo. And you saw some of that happen as reported in unaudited actuals where, oh, they promised this money and then they take it away. So we still have to plan for these cuts in December so we can implement decisions. And then in January, we sort of have to make a scenario. What if we get that money in May or June? What if we don't? And so that's where this implementation will take a lot more planning, but our HR department will need to give layoff notices so that if there are employees that are identified that might be laid off, to be able to make those cuts. We can make that March 15 timeline. So by February in this timeline, we would have to bring to the board a list of layoffs for certificated staff because they have to be laid off by March 15 by law. But for our classified staff, of course, there's a different cycle there. It's a 60-day window. And so that gives us a little bit more wiggle room to plan later. But we certainly will be working in January to March to sort of lay out, okay, if we're going to make these cuts, and the board has voted on these cuts, this is the time in those 3 months when we're showing how we do that. And the district restructure planning is ongoing, and you'll see April 2020, it's ongoing. And then there's midterm planning and long-term strategic planning to implement cuts, because I think what you'll see is that you're going to be in a cycle, very likely, where you will have more cuts to make. So, in general, and just as a summary, and I think these are the key points that I hope people will remember as the big picture, and this is the same slide I shared at Tuesday when we presented at the library. The big picture and what it means for the Coastside community is we have conditional budget approval by the county. That means there must be actionable cuts approved by the board in December to avoid insolvency and to avoid takeover by the county. And the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team coming in to make cuts that don't become board decisions, that don't become based on a democratically elected representative board, that aren't local control, but that are somebody else from outside the community making those cuts. The parcel tax renewal outcome will determine the budget cut amount required. I've said this numerous times now, and everybody I think is hearing it. In either scenario, there are drastic budget cuts that will require us to have a workforce restructure. The truth of the matter is, because of things that are outside of our control, like inadequate funding from the state, and because of things that are inside our control, the arrangements we've made over time in this district, and how we've staffed, we will need to restructure our workforce to make those cuts. Those could include potential school consolidation. I will remind people, I think it was Redwood City last year that closed 4 schools to be able to achieve their ends. That has to be something that we consider. Staffing reductions has to be something we have to consider because, as you saw on that other slide, 82% of our dollars are for staff. Elimination of services that we think are essential but we may not be able to afford. Outsourcing of services to try to lower costs. Other changes in services, reduction in contracts, and exploring cost service transfers to partner organizations to achieve efficiency. And then these decisions, again, in short, I think this is the big takeaway for everyone. These cuts must be decided upon by this board in December, and then there will be ongoing mid-year cuts throughout this current year that can be implemented, including not filling vacant positions and other savings opportunities, but we have to make these cuts and the board has to vote on these cuts. Back to this thing about not filling vacant positions, in recent weeks we've had staff who have decided to resign or retire, and we are taking a hard look at that now, and if they are non-essential positions or if we think we can cover it, we thank those folks for their service, but we will try to make these cuts mid-year as we can to keep the cuts away from the classroom as we need to, but also to make some mid-year cuts so that we can start building on this, and those decisions will be ongoing. But again, the bottom line is we have a budget crisis. That budget crisis will be bigger if we can't count on a parcel tax. Not that I can advocate for it or against it. The budget cuts include some really drastic things, and they include people's livelihoods and services to our kids. And the decision must be made by the board in December, lest we risk county takeover. I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions, comments? Mary Beth?
Sean, before I was on the board, when someone would say year end, I would always think December. But I think a lot of what you're saying next year, you're talking about next school year, 2021, am I correct?
That's right.
Okay, and is there anything that people would see in the classrooms before that 2021 school year?
No, I mean, I don't believe so. We can't make mid-year cuts. We're contracted with teachers, so this year you're going to see arrangements that we've made continue. But I will be talking with, for example, with classroom teachers, representatives, CUTA representatives about changes that we can make and that we can talk about. That maybe, we certainly want to meet our contractual obligations, and I have a commitment to that, and I've expressed that to Heidi and Ramon and others, that I take the contract very seriously. But the truth of the matter is, we've got some arrangements now that we cannot abandon. And so, no, I don't think people are going to be seeing any change currently, but we do need to make cuts for the following school year. That's correct, for 2020, 2021.
And can you talk about the timeline a little more? If we, give the pink slips in March, when would we know the finals, and when would we pull back if we got more than we thought we were? Do you have any idea? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, my experience in the past about this is that districts typically give out sort of more pink slips necessarily than they have to institute. And so, for example, I'll give you an example. You've got a teacher and they're junior, they're not a veteran in the district, and they get a pink slip because, last hired, first fired. And you give a pink slip, and they're on this list, and they're expecting to lose their job, and then someone retires. And then you can retract that pink slip. So I think it is often the case that in districts, when we have good budget times, we create a layoff list, and then we never institute it at all. But in this case, with this number of employees, and when we talk about like a certificated employee with benefits and salary being akin to $100,000 a year, and you see that to the tune of 2.5 million, you're really looking at over 20 employees that we may be laying off. And so, and that could be classified or certificated. I can't guarantee, we're just not going to be able to just hire everybody back. There will be cuts, and people will be waiting and anticipating when they're going to be let go, because they'll be waiting to see if there's retirements and they can take a spot. But at the end of the day, yeah, I think you'll probably see pink slips and layoffs going out in March that we would approve at this board meeting in February, and you would see those employees waiting until, and that's the other sad thing about this, is when we have this kind of ambiguity, is we actually lose people because they go and take other jobs, and usually newer teachers, and newer employees, and unfortunately the case is they may take other jobs, and then we may be able to pull them back and they may not stay.
Just real quick, you've touched on this as well as Jim did in terms of the state funding being inadequate, but I think we really need to stress that in particular with our district, given where we live right now in San Mateo County, in that there are many districts in this county that get significantly more per pupil than we do. And I think that we need to remember that, and remember that there is an inequity built into California school funding, and we are the result of that. And I do believe that we do an admirable job, and we have in the last, trying to keep and maintain all of our services, but we've reached this point where the state is no longer increasing their funding. They're not guaranteeing those one-time funds that we used in the past, as well as declining enrollment when we are getting funds based upon how many students are in there in our classrooms. That in itself, those two factors brought our funds down $1 million in the last year from the state. And so I think we need to get back to that message that right now California is not adequately funding public education, and there is not the political pressure on a statewide level, because there are districts that get $15,000, $16,000, $17,000 per pupil, and we are not one of those. We get about $10,000, $11,000 per pupil. In a county that is very wealthy. And so I think that we just need to keep that in mind in terms of the community pressure. I know that there are parents here who are working on that to pressure the state to take action, and you can see it across the state right now with Oakland Unified, LA Unified, other districts having to go bankrupt. But I think that we have definitely reached a crisis point at a time when California is actually doing quite well. And I think that we really need to remember that it is not us versus them. We do not want to make cuts. We value our teachers, our staff, the work that everybody does. we are being forced into this situation because of circumstances beyond our control. And I think that we need to go through that with that attitude and also moving forward to try and make that larger change. PB 39 is looking good. Whether that'll save us for this next year, for all of our cuts or not, we don't know. It would depend on how much the new governor would appropriate for it if it indeed passes and he signs it. But I just want us to keep that larger picture in mind as well when we're looking at all of these things. So hopefully we can all work together to figure out solutions on a local level, but also try and impact that statewide level.
Just so everybody understands, AB 39, Assembly Bill 39, authored by, I think it's Assembly Member Murat Suchi out of Torrance, California, is about moving the aspirational targets for local control funding formula so they are higher, and it is moving through the legislature. And again, that's basically just aspirational targets. It will always remain the case that we will rely on the legislature and the governor to see if those actually get budgeted. But yes, what you bring up there is an important point. I believe we had a slide shown in August that showed that it was $18,000 per student down the highway in La Honda Pescadero, and it's 10.5 here. These funding levels are variable depending on what kind of families are in a district and how much revenue they bring because of their characteristics. And with declining enrollment, certainly, that doesn't help us either. The cost of Bay Area living, when I hear Ramon and Heidi speak to this, I know that to be true. This is a very difficult time for teachers and particularly also for classified staff to be able to afford the cost of living in the Bay Area. And again, the state funding formula takes into no account the cost of living in the Bay Area. So I think it's an important point that we're in this kind of budget crisis, in many ways through no fault of our own, and yet we have to do what we can to control our expenses going forward.
Sean, I just had one comment about the Financial Advisory Committee. Is that what they're called? Yeah. That started last year, and they were basically helping to identify what changes, what cuts the public would like to see. But I'm really glad to hear that you're bringing them back in because, you know, as a board, we really want to hear what people think about and what they would suggest for cuts as well.
Yeah, just to be clear.
Thanks for doing that.
Oh, thank you. Just to be clear, I was in email contact with them. They spoke to me Tuesday night at the library, 2 members of that team, and said, would you like us to come back? And I said, absolutely, because of course I never met with that committee, and we've been looking at their recommendations and kind of making realistic calculations based on savings, based on those recommendations, and adding more that we could potentially discover. And so we will be reconvening that committee before we come back to the board to deliver and talking to other people about potential cuts before we come back to the board in October, November, December to review them again.
I just want to make a comment. One thing that I've observed as a parent throughout the years and as a board member over the last few years that I really, really appreciate is the feeling that, you know, the observation, it's more than a feeling, that there's not one person in this district that is not here because they want to do well by our students. And I just want to point that out and just like appreciate, this was the closest I had to red, by the way, so I sort of point out how much, I think, speaking on behalf of all of us, if I may, for a minute, take that liberty to say how much we appreciate every minute of every day and all those tears that we know you shed. I'm sure we do too in different circumstances. How much we appreciate and support everybody, whether you're at the table up here with us here on our monthly meetings, whether you're in the classroom with our kids every day, or whether you're sweeping up at the end of the day when everyone else has gone home. It's just, I cannot say it enough how much we appreciate all of that. Everyone means something, you know, to all of us. And there's not one person here that isn't valued, you know, our volunteers as well, I'll throw them in, you know, that come into our classrooms, and our families that give so much financially, you know, in terms of their time. I just can't emphasize that enough. And, you know, also want to comment on what I've seen again through you're less than 2 months on the job, Sean, and the really tremendous collaborative leadership and this spirit. I feel like this is a difficult situation for us all in our community. And this is not just people in this room. This is not just the kids. This is the coast side, right? We all know this is not an issue of schools or kids or families. This is all of us. And the energy that I feel, over the last time, especially since you've been here and started to form these new relationships with people, and right, people can speak to it if it was within process from the room, but it's palpable, that we have this spirit of collaborative leadership, and I think that's what's gonna help us get through, and just, we're in it together, right? So thank you for all you've done, and thank you to all the partners in the room, not in the room, at home, wherever they are, that will be sweeping up afterwards, everybody for all that we've done. And I know we can do this. It's going to be hard, but we will get through it and we'll be stronger. So thank you very much. Okay, and I just need to check one thing very quickly.
While you're checking that, I just want to say again, shout out to the folks in red in the room. They are part of a national movement. They are part of a state movement. They are part of collective action to raise the concerns, and they're fighting for more funding at the state level and at the local level, and I appreciate the collective action efforts taken by people wearing red whenever you're wearing red.
All right, and just in, hot off the press, sliding into agenda item 11A, which is the previous one / I guess related enough to this one. Brianna LaFontaine, please come to the podium for your comment.
Hello, thank you. Sorry, my heart is beating out of my chest right now because I am not used to this type of forum. I am part of Co-Siders for Better Education Funding and following very closely with AB 39. And since that was brought up, after Tuesday night's meeting, so yesterday, I called Mr. Mirasuki's office, and AB 39 will not be going to the Senate floor this week. It will become a 2-year bill, and it will not be seen until next year. The impression is the governor will not sign as is until funding to increase those caps can be better placed and figured out where they're coming from. So that, as a backup or a fall, is not what we should be looking at in the near future, and things like passing a parcel tax and other cuts or other ways to make money or figure it out is what we're going to have to do for the near future, at least.
Very good, thank you, Brianna. I think that fits well with our strategy, which has been hope for the best but expect the worst from the state. Just sum that up. All right, so any other further comments or questions for this item? All right, so we will close that and move on to item 12, discussion and public hearings. Item 12A, public hearing and adopt resolution to approve the statement for the pupil textbook and instructional incentive program for the 2019 to 2020 school year. Is that Leticia? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is not my item. Oh, the textbook material? I'm sorry. Yes, it is my item. So yes, we know that at Hatch Elementary School, is this on? Hatch Elementary School, we were able to adopt an ELA curriculum, Maravillas, which is wonders. And because of this, we do have old Houghton Mifflin materials that are just sitting at the school site, and by law, we cannot disperse those extra materials to other sites. or give those materials to families, or even try to sell them on Amazon and see if we can have some funding source from those sales. But because of this, we do need to approve getting rid of the materials through an official board meeting so that we can proceed with all of the alternatives that I just described. Thank you.
Do you have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? So we'll open it for discussion or questions, or should we, point of order, do the public hearing first?
Public hearing first.
Okay, so we'll open open the public, I'm sorry, just realized. We'll open the public hearing for this item. And are there any comments from the public? Seeing as there are none, we will close the public hearing portion. Okay, and any comments, further comments or questions? We will go to roll call vote as this is a resolution, and we'll start to my right. Freya. Aye. Aye. Sorry. Okay, passes 5+1 to 0. Okay, it brings us to item 12B, review and discuss a draft of the board governance handbook. Sean.
So, we don't have a PowerPoint for this, but it was in the board materials. It's online for everyone to review. Really quickly, this is a discussion item. It will return back in October. Sorry, the music is just fabulous right now. Keep it light and lively. So the governance handbook will come back in October for vote. Basically, the board and I met in a special board meeting in August with Sepide Yao of California School Boards Association, and we developed a board governance handbook from a Good Beginnings workshop to talk about the purpose of a governance team, a board and their superintendent, their purpose, their unity of purpose, and basically develop roles and responsibilities, how you set the direction for the district, how you establish the structure, how you provide the support, how you ensure accountability, how you demonstrate leadership, how you have positive culture among the governance team, how you have norms, and then you have protocols. And so tonight we just cleaned up the document a little bit, and we're presenting it to the board, and this would serve as sort of a roadmap going forward for how the board is expected to work with their superintendent and to work among each other for the public good. And I'll leave it there to let the board discuss what they think of the governance handbook.
Okay. Do we have any comments, questions?
I just thought it was a good reflection of what we did that day, so I think it looks great.
Same, I agree. I want to call out the self-evaluation part of it, because we did talk about actually doing a formal self-evaluation, and that wasn't exactly reflected in there. It said self-evaluation, we will schedule workshops annually to review governance team, but we actually talked about doing an official self-evaluation of the board, and I would just like to maybe put in a plug that we do something like that perhaps in January is when we talked about doing it. And then also another part of it that we had talked about doing, which would then require some kind of action, was kind of informal, but more formal board meetings where we could do study sessions and read different books or other kinds of things. So I just want to throw that out there to the rest of the board members. I do think that that would be positive for moving forward if other people are interested in that. So those are my comments.
I would also like to build on the study sessions. As a board, and because of the Brown Act, while I value the integrity of the process, I also appreciate that that some conversations take longer, that we need to listen to each other, and that each one of us has different contact with different people in the community, and it's so essential to be able to bring that to the table and have a relaxed conversation without feeling rushed and cut off. And so I think that by having those study sessions, that enables us to have a full conversation without just a snippet of information and then having to react to partial information. So that was, I would agree that that was one piece that with additional opportunities to meet will help us and the community. And we won't sleep.
I just want to add, I think it's incredibly helpful to have this as a baseline from which we can do, self-assessments, self-assessments as a baseline and continuing on moving forward, especially when let's face it, we're going to have a pretty interesting year ahead of us. So I think to have this as kind of, I don't know what the right word is, like our kind of place where we come back to as far as how we get to where we need to be over the next several months and potentially beyond, I think is incredibly helpful. So we can continue to kind of, I guess, brainstorm and think about ways that we keep this fresh in our mind. I think too often I've had the experience where, okay, we do something cool and it goes on the shelf and you forget about it, or it goes in a file. Maybe that's another area we can think about as well. Is like, how do we keep this in the forefront of our mind, just to like some way to remember? I don't know. Just I don't know what the answer is, but maybe it's something we can give a think to.
I can just react to that. Remember, Sepide Yao of California School Boards Association said sometimes boards will use a placemat of the protocols at their chairs, and it would be a way to remind the board, and if you were to, it's a public document, remind the public of how you work together and what you're aspiring to, and a way to hold yourselves and me, or whoever you're working with at the time, accountable to those protocols.
Any other comments or questions? All right, well then, we will move on.
That will come back to a vote next month.
Very good. Thank you.
So thank you for your discussion tonight.
All right, so back to item 13, communications. We'll start with the board members. I'll start to my right, Freya.
Just want to say welcome back to school to everyone. It feels like we've been here for a long time already, but it's been exciting to see all of the schools get settled in. And principals, I will try and send out that email and get up to sites to meet with principals and meet with all the staff at some point in the next month and a half as well. I feel like I've kind of said a bunch about our funding, and I'm very sad to hear about AB 39. I haven't yet given up trying to look to the state for other ways of funding, in part at least, so I will keep exploring those options. And I want to just give a plug for Measure I for the parcel tax renewal. It's going to be vital to not decimate our district, provide a little bit of a bridge, hopefully some safety. So there's a great committed group of parents who are really active on that. So if anybody would like to get involved, please get in touch with them. It's going to be very vitally important. And I think we just need to keep putting that pressure on the state to really fully fund education and figure out this statewide issue. There was a great letter to the editor in this week's review about the difference in how much we spend per prisoner and how much we spend per pupil. And I think that that is just very indicative of where our state is right now. And I think that we need to realign our priorities. So that's all. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and it's nice to see everybody here and stay, at least for most of the, I know everybody has busy schedules, but it is appreciated, especially when we have budget stuff that is very, it's really hard to swallow, but we're all here for a reason, and like our president has said,
No, Mom has been like on you all. That's what keep going.
I'm sorry, I wanted to reach over, I'm sorry. I'm looking at something.
I think it's in our board, not that bad, but yeah. There's a fly.
I want to thank Ramon and Heidi for taking time to meet with me, and more than anything, just reaching out and just trying to build a better communication between the board and CUTA. Also, just create that transparency and that communication that is needed. I also want to let Heidi and Ramon know there's something that came up about a flow chart, like an organization flow chart, and that's something also that also when I met with Leticia, before we even start cutting things, and we have to have an inventory and know who is around, and not only for school sites, but also as a district, at the district level. So it's being updated. I spoke to I'm an English language learner, like Ramon said, and I haven't practiced your name, but I'm really big on like titles, because to this day, if I knew you as Mr. or Doctor, but I'm just gonna call you Sean. I'm gonna call you Sean. Like, there's some people like Mr. Nazar, I would never call him John, but I will call you Sean. And it's there is respect there. I'm getting older, and I feel like at least I could say that. Like, once again, thank you. I really appreciate your time and willingness to reach out, even though I was rushing with my daughter, had her sit at the table next to us and kind of bribe her. Also, I was involved with 9 other of my family members at the Color Run, which I thought was really important to push my family to participate, not only to support the schools, but also just to open and have more participation from the Latino community, because sadly it's not really there. And so I want people to understand that sometimes the lack of participation also has to do with financial difficulties. I understand that the money's going for a good cause, but it's also another financial burden. But it was a lot of fun, and I've also made another. I've already started to set another goal for next year. It was I'm out of shape. I'm gonna say it, and I was like, man, next year I'm gonna do better. So I was a little bummed that Mr. Nazar was just like rooting and not participating. So
Next year.
But it was a lot of fun. And I also attended a few of the back to school nights, one as a parent and the high school as a board member. And sometimes it's just nice to remember the great things that are happening and the great people that are behind, and it's really bittersweet. I'm like with no words, just thinking about all these budget cuts. The cuts that we're gonna have to face, unfortunately. I also met with our superintendent, Sean, and like always, I just like to just acknowledge and really let you know how I appreciate the support and the constant communication that you have with us. It's amazing, it's necessary, and right now it's very much needed. So thank you very, very much. And thank you for meeting with me as well. Big Lift collaboration, I was also part of that. And I was invited, and it's an honor. My daughter has also, as an English language learner, has struggled, and she was also part of the Big Lift. So to collaborate and just continue to give back and support this program that really supports our kids and is a great resource for our kids, and ultimately our kids are our future. So I'm excited about that. And like I said earlier, I met with Leticia, and I wanted to touch bases on ELD and ELD instruction and the DLACs and the ELACs, and just get more parent involvement and parent engagement and a lot more communication, and just, I've even, I'm really excited that, Leticia is on board, and it looks like it's going to be a great year. So thank you. And I got an amazing book, which I hope you talk about. I hope you guys talk about, because it's great. We were able to get that grant for those books that you will talk about. So, and that's what I've been up to so far. So thank you.
So in the face of all of the potential cuts, as an alumni parent with 2 kids that graduated from the district, sometimes you have things and sometimes you don't. And I just want to honor the teachers we have in this district. And
recognize their professional savvy. And it's been a while since I've talked about kind of the philosophy of education. It's been a few years since I served on the committees on professional development and when Dr. Warwick was here. And these were some things that had happened that really gave me insight into some of the thinking and planning and the possibility for this district. And so what my heart wants for this district is to not just talk about those elements that by line item we can't fund, but remember that teachers day in and day out are thinking possibility. They're thinking project-based learning. They're thinking, what can I do to reach this group of kids and meet all of these individual needs? And so, please know that we're not trying to hack off arms and legs. That when we see these line items and we have a conversation, that we're talking deeper, not about that one little piece, but how does that fit in the context of continuity between elementary and middle and high school. And, you know, are the surveys that we're putting out really what are getting to the core message? Are we getting the information we need from teachers? If you do a panorama survey, I've heard from a number of teachers that's not the case. And I think that there's a lot of possibility. So while we are really frustrated with the situation we're in right now, as a community, it's our jobs to tell the public that we have a fabulous public education system in Cabrillo Unified District. We cannot forget that messaging. That our kids, even if we do have to fit 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag, that we have other people in the community, the CEF, and you know, the parent volunteers, and we've got other people that are helping to boost us. And so we're not going to give up on us. There is and talking about 10 pounds and 5-pound bag, our district funds 2 teachers, and not even full-time because some of them teach other sections in middle school and high school, for music. And the PTOs pay for elementary music. Thank you, parents. There's a community organization called Musical Odyssey that exposes children, young children, elementary age. They do a 1-hour concert, and then they have a cookie reception afterwards. And these are first-class professional musicians that come in. So if you would like to hear music for Quinteto Latino, and sorry I butchered Spanish, I'm gonna learn something. This is a quintet that plays all Latin music for 1 hour and bring kids out to expose them. It's at the Community United Methodist Church. This is a secular activity, not sacred. And everybody is welcome, but it's really important that schools partner with the community. And if we want to boost the best of what this community offers for all children, this is a free concert. So that's my plug for free concert September 15th on Sunday from 1 to 2 o'clock. And we'll keep working with the state and all these other pieces.
I just really wanted to talk about last Tuesday night and really thank Sean and Sophia for the presentation they did to the community last Tuesday. And I thought it was wonderful. I love it that we're taking this information out because it's always available here at our board meetings, but it's nice to really bring it out to the public. And I'm so glad to see that so many of you were there, and I see a lot of the same faces here tonight. So I'm also feeling that support that Kim talked about our schools and that people believe in them and that they're a good place to be. And I really saw it Tuesday night, and I just really want to thank you guys. I thought the presentation was wonderful. The questions from the audience were great, and I hope we can continue to do that and bring it out to everyone, because I want everyone to understand the situation and know what's going on, because I think we can all band together to help do something about it.
so much. I'll just kind of take off that as well, and just, those are kind of the themes that are running through my mind. Of course, it's the financial stuff that's keeping me kind of sort of up at night, just the numbers bouncing around in my head. But, you know, thinking a lot about community engagement and how important that is, and I think that was my biggest, like, joy on Tuesday night, is seeing the full house at the library. And I spoke with Annie afterwards, and she said it was one of the most well-attended events they've ever had there. I think we found like Jackie Spear in some shark movie. I wasn't quite sure what that was about. But Jackie Spear, I mean, I'm honored to be like even close to that. So that level of community engagement, I think it's our schools, right? And I think Sean spoke to that during his presentation. This is all of us, right? This is whether you have kids or not. So I think that's fantastic. The other thing that comes to mind when I think about collaborative leadership, and you know, we're going to need that to get to changing how we're doing what we do for students, is diversity and inclusion. And I mentioned that because we have a couple resolutions and proclamations, I can't remember which is which, coming up later tonight. We're going to get to those because I know a bunch of you guys are waiting, but this was important too, right? Because that diversity, and not only the diversity is kind of like what you have, is the mix of stuff you have, but it's really the inclusion and how you include those diverse opinions, whether they be based on gender, sexual preferences, or age, or family status, or ethnicity, or lifestyle, whatever it is. I think that inclusion is really important. So I'm really pleased that we're continuing with Sean's leadership to address the different aspects of diversity and inclusion, because that's another important element of what we have going. So thank you very much. I will pass it on to Lauren.
Okay. Hello, everybody. So here are the first school site reports, or for some of the schools of the school year. So El Granada has had a very successful start to the new school year. Our back to school night was well attended, with teachers reporting packed classrooms and smiling parents. Last Friday, our PTO sponsored a family fun night. It was a great family get together and a wonderful way to kick off the weekend. Next Thursday, we will kick off our Tea and Talks. We will be talking about all the different school and community supports available to families and their children. The month will end with goal-setting conferences. At Fair Lawn View, the school year started with a positive excitement of a new principal. The entire Fair Lawn View community has warmly welcomed new administration and new staff. Fair Lawn View teachers and students have participated in getting to know each other's names by an activity from the My Name, My Identity campaign. Staff continued further in building connections with each other under the guidance of the Acknowledge Alliance workshop funded by PTO. The Fair Lawn View Literary Garage Sale was very successful. The staff works very diligently to foster a positive environment in which all students are supported and engaged. As a result, students are all smiles in classrooms and with friends. Cunha Intermediate has had an amazing start to the year. We moved back into the C building, yay, and everyone is happy to be back in modern, refurbished classrooms and out of the portables, as well as getting everyone together in the center of campus again. Our leadership students have put on great Friday Spirit activities like the blind water balloon toss and a ping pong ball and spoon race. We had our annual Spirit Assembly, in which each class competed for points in classic events such as the textbook stack relay and sleeping bag drag. It was super fun, and Mr. Barnes turned out to be good at eating cookies off his face. If you want to look, I'm sure there's videos on the YouTube. Speaking of video, in addition to CUSD produced spots, the leadership class is now producing CCN, Cunha Cub News. You can see the first broadcast on our website video gallery. Back to School Night was a great event with our Cunha band playing and leadership kids out in force to guide parents around following their students' schedules. The teachers did a great job, and the parents Mr. Barnes talked to were very impressed. We have had a good beginning and are looking forward to a great year. Half Moon Bay High School has had a tremendous start to the school year. Many new staff members have found their way to Half Moon Bay High School this year, and we are very happy to have them. We had our second annual Cougar Color Run, where people in the community participated in this fun, colorful, and all-around beneficial fundraiser. Our next upcoming fundraiser is the Cougar Golf Classic on October 6th. Please join us for a nice day out on the course, the dinner that will follow, or both. We invited the parents to our annual Back to School Night, where they were able to follow their students' schedules and meet their teachers. Our hardworking leadership class hosted the Welcome Back Assembly yesterday, which was a huge success. We kicked off the school year with fun games, performances by our cheer squads, videos produced by students, the announcement of the homecoming court, and the reveal of this year's homecoming themes. Club Jam will take place tomorrow during lunch. This is an opportunity for students to be introduced and potentially sign up for clubs to stay involved on campus. We have various clubs on our campus that range from environmental club to music writing club to a national honor society and much more. Fall sports are in full swing with girls tennis, volleyball, and golf, cheerleading, football, water polo, and cross country. In addition, our awesome marching band had the incredible opportunity to play with Stanford University's band at one of their Saturday football games. We are very excited for the rest of our school year with our amazing community made up of parents, staff members, and the student body. Go Cougars! Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, Sean.
First of all, I've heard numerous people talk about the gifts and the blessings and the assets that this community enjoys, and over the last couple of months being here, I've certainly seen that, whether that's been meeting with representatives of Cabrillo Education Foundation or the Big Lift Committee or the athletic boosters at the high school, the PTO representatives, city council, the city manager, on and on it goes. Just meeting more and more people and seeing how many contributions are made by by community members to the district. I think we're very grateful. I think you are very blessed to live here. I think it's a great thing. I did hear earlier people talk about part of that is the community's progressive aims to being more diverse and more inclusive and to focusing on equity. And tonight you will have a proclamation, a board policy actually, the board will vote on using an equity lens to be able to address student needs and to target resources to students who need them most in order to be college and career ready and to be okay. Part of that clearly was last month when the board approved for the first time a Hispanic Heritage Month proclamation. I was very privileged today to meet with Belinda Arriaga and from ALAS, which is Latinos Aspirando a Soñar, I believe. I think I got that right. Aspiring Latinos to dream. Ayudando Latinos a Soñar, helping Latinos to dream. And so I was able to meet with Belinda today. Thank you, Rosie, for helping me remember that. And I just was kind of knocked out by how much ALAS is doing for our community, whether it's through baile folklorico or through mariachi or through offering mental health services to people who need it, or advocacy, especially for immigrant families. This theme going through, I think, is important for us to remember in relation to Hispanic Heritage Month, which starts off on Sunday, right, on September 15th. And a quick plug for Quinteto Latino también, also at the Community United Methodist Church. But I also just want to say that Belinda Arriaga met with Dr. Patia to get us $2,000 from the Philanthropic Venture Fund. Did I get that right? And that was a grant to buy us a book that we all shared with principals and will soon be shared at all our schools, called Mama's Nightingale, A Story of Immigration and Separation. And I say that as a way to connect also the dots to the fact that we are going to be having also tonight a proclamation from the San Mateo County Office of Education, which we are co-endorsing, that we are endorsing, about the rights and needs of immigrants, and for us to protect those rights and needs. And I think that's very important. I think that's very evident here. And so I am very humbled and very proud to be able to serve in a district that is thinking this way, that is acknowledging the needs of all people, There will also be a proclamation later tonight about LGBTQ Heritage Month, History Month, for our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer and questioning brothers and sisters. And I think this is very important. I think this board and I think this community should acknowledge that we are working together to defend and uplift the rights of all people. And I think that's very important to keep us driving forward. Speaking of that, earlier in the month I was able to go to a Big 5 safety training at San Mateo County Office of Education. I'm just astounded, this didn't happen in my last county where I worked, that everyone in the Big 5 is doing the same things, and that we're getting trained in how to respond to have safe schools when we have to drop and cover and hold on, or we have to do we have to do any kind of thing to protect us from earthquake or fire or concerns in the community. So I know that I just want the community to know that we will continue to train. October will bring us the Great Shakeout in California, so we will do earthquake preparation. We will continue to train so that our students, our staff, our families understand where we are, and in my last community newsletter I sent some information about that. I do want to remind people too that we are undergoing a facilities master plan update because we haven't had one since 2012. Construction costs have changed, and certainly the board will need to understand from a demographer what the future of population will look like and what kind of families will be and where they will be and what kind of buildings we will need for that. I certainly think when I look at Half Moon Bay High School facilities, their athletic facilities in particular, I think, wow, you guys should be the envy of, you are the envy of many districts, I think. You have some wonderful facilities and some needs there. When I look at Cunha and I think how fabulous the new building C is, I know it was painful for the public, but that's a 21st century, wonderful science rooms, music room, arts room. I'll be putting out a press release on that in weeks ahead to describe that. I think we just need to be able to think wisely, to be able to build buildings that will accommodate students in a healthy way, in a way that is conducive to learning, that is a way that is conducive to play, and that is a way that is conducive to helping us with our bottom line problems by being net zero, responsible to the community, following the triple bottom line, where it's good for people, it's good for planet, and it's good for our bottom line. We don't make profits, but we can be fiscally responsible. Again, I mentioned the LGBTQ proclamation. I think that's important. The immigrant proclamation coming up, I think that's important. And I just want to remind everybody, Sunday is when we start Hispanic Heritage Month, and I look forward to schools doing their art contest, working in classrooms to understand the rich heritage that is the Coast Side community, and I thank you for including me in it.
Thank you very much, Sean. Okay, that brings us to item 14, consent items. Do we have a motion to approve? Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Aye, passes 5 + 1 to 0. Okay, item 15, action items. 15A, adopt resolution number 16-19 in support of Cabrillo Unified School District immigrant communities. Sean.
As I think I introduced, this resolution comes to the board. I'll read it quickly. Whereas the Cabrillo Unified School District Governing Board and the Cabrillo Unified School District Superintendent recognize and value the rich history and contributions of immigrants, refugees, and other newcomers to our schools and local communities. And whereas our county is diverse, with foreign-born residents comprising more than 34% of the county's total population. And whereas we aspire to create safe school communities where students and their families, regardless of race, ethnicity, place of origin, or citizenship status, are welcomed, accepted, encouraged to fully participate and thrive, free of discrimination, oppression, racism, and violence. And whereas we support our immigrant communities and believe our county should be a place of trust and safety for immigrants who live and attend school here. And whereas a relationship of trust and unity between immigrant families and local education agencies is essential to effective implementation of educational rights. And whereas ensuring the health, well-being, and civil and human rights of all people, regardless of their immigration status, by promoting inclusivity, understanding, and anti-racist values, behaviors, systems, practices, and policies is a responsibility of San Mateo County educational leaders. And whereas the Cabrillo Unified School District Governing Board and the Cabrillo Unified School District Superintendent reject the inflammatory politics of division that incite anger, hate, and violence, now therefore be it resolved that the Cabrillo Unified School District Governing Board and the Cabrillo Unified School District Superintendent hereby support inclusion and equity and reject any form of oppression for all populations, including immigrants, refugees, and other newcomers. And we will entertain a vote by the board and discussion if you want it.
We have a motion to approve. Second? We have comments or questions?
I just have comments. As a daughter of an immigrant and an immigrant myself, thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Lizette. Thank you, everybody. I think you said it all, how much this means, I think, for all of us as part of the different elements of diversity that we appreciate, especially as I think we can all agree the last few months have been particularly hard for many of our communities with events over the summer, and even this week's announcement with Bay City Flowers going to have pretty significant impact on our immigrant and first-generation communities here. So I think this feels like we say this every month, but more important than ever that we band together and protect and support and lift up those most vulnerable in our communities. So thank you.
That's yours earlier.
So this is a resolution, so we'll go to roll call vote for this. We're going to switch it up and start there for once, just to make things diverse. Not really, but okay. Mary Beth?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, passes 5 + 1 to 0. Yeah. Figured. Okay, so this brings us to item 15B, which I know folks have been waiting for out there. Adopt proclamation designating October LGBTQ, I think it's plus month. So I'll send this off to Sean.
Again, I think it's important enough to this community to also proclaim the rights and to declare October as Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer History Month. So I'll just read the resolution. Whereas members of the Cabrillo Unified School District Governing Board support the rights, freedoms, and equality of those who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning, LGBTQ. And whereas all students deserve to feel safe and welcome in their schools, to be known by their preferred name, gender identity, story, as well as to see themselves represented in the curricula. And whereas the California Legislature adopted AB 677, Chapter 744 in 2017, encouraging schools to collect voluntary self-identification information on sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. And whereas on April 8, 2003, the Federal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in a case brought by local Santa Clara County students, Flores versus Morgan Hill Unified School District, that school district staff were responsible for maintaining safe school environments and for equitable enforcement of non-discrimination statutes and policies. And whereas SOGI, which again is the Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity and Expression data and training, promotes welcoming schools, improves understanding of LGBTQ students, and supports educators to provide services in a non-discriminatory and respectful manner. And whereas a number of LGBTQ historical events and people of all races have contributed to the history of equality for all people, and whereas LGBTQ individuals have made and continue to make lasting contributions to strengthen the fabric of American society, and whereas October holds historical significance because in October 1979, the first LGBT National March on Washington occurred, marking the 10th anniversary of the Stonewall riots, and also in October 1988, the first National Coming Out Day was celebrated, and every year on October 11th, National Coming Out Day and annual LGBTQ Awareness Day is observed. And whereas the month of October has been established to remind all cultures within our wider community of the important roles LGBTQ people have taken in shaping the social, historical, legal, and political worlds we live in today, and whereas the Cabrillo Governing Board appreciates and recognizes the importance of LGBTQ History Month as an effective means of educating and calling to action the citizens of the city of Half Moon Bay to work together by fighting prejudice and discrimination in their own lives, and whereas in 2019, the Cabrillo Unified School District has started a conversation with our community, Coast Pride, and the Half Moon Bay Chamber of Commerce, among other civic leaders and district leadership, who will join together in an effort to honor LGBTQ rights, uniting us all in a social justice platform to uphold the rights of all people. And whereas increasing visibility, raising awareness, and teaching LGBTQ history fosters a welcoming school climate where LGBTQ students, families, and educators can live their authentic lives and be treated with dignity and respect. Therefore, now it be resolved that the Cabrillo Unified School District Governing Board recognizes, supports, celebrates, and honors October as Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer LGBTQ History Month. 2, the Cabrillo Unified School District recognizes the importance of and supports integrating sexual orientation and gender identity and expression, SOGIE, S-O-G-I-E, data collection in schools. And 3, the CUSD recognizes and supports the implementation of programs and curricula that reflect the diversity of LGBTQ people. I want to thank my colleagues for working with Coast Pride and coming up with a very powerful proclamation that will bring us into a place where we can know people's names, know their stories, know their identities, and respect them for the beautiful human beings they are.
Thank you very much, Sean. We have a few comments from the audience, so I will call you up one at a time. We can start with Jenny, right? We'll go first. Jenny.
Good evening. School board members, president, superintendent, and all of you from the Cabrillo Unified School District. What an awesome place we live that this equity lens is coming from all of you to make us all feel welcome and included. And superintendent's been here 2 months. You know, everyone could have put their heads in the sand and said, we got fiscal problems, we can't do any of this, but no. So I just want to start by saying that, and then saying, so my name's Jenny Walter. I live with my wife, Deb, my daughter, Jessie, in Half Moon Bay. I'm wearing my Coast Pride hat, and I want to say on behalf of Coast Pride, we are very grateful to the Cabrillo Unified School District, to the superintendent and the school board for its consideration of the proclamation to designate October as LGBTQ History Month. And we're ready to partner with you as we have been, and we're so pleased that we can, so that we can make our schools more welcoming and inclusive of all sexual orientations and gender identities. We've come a long way, and our children are coming out earlier and earlier because they do feel safer. However, the recent San Mateo County Youth Survey shows serious problems still exist. They don't feel safe coming out to school counselors or coaches at school. They avoid school bathrooms, school events, and extracurricular activities because they feel unsafe. They're harassed, assaulted, and feel discriminated at school. 80% of the youth surveyed in the report said that they hear other students using gay slurs and homophobic remarks. and too many feel isolated and depressed. 75% reported feeling sad, hopeless, or anxious for more than 2 weeks. 75% of youth reported having stopped usual activities, like going to school or having fun after school, due to their sadness, anxiety, or stress. Even though over half reached out to a counselor for help, a therapist, 77% of those youth reported thoughts of self-harm. This proclamation is a symbol of hope and a call to action, both to learn LGBTQ history and to take important steps to ensure, 1, all students are known by their preferred name and gender identity, and 2, our schools are welcoming and inclusive for the diversity of all our students, including our sexual and gender minorities. I really want to thank you, each and every one of you, and do a quick call out to Dr. Wade, the superintendent, and Mr. Owens, who really worked so hard on this proclamation, and thank you for considering it tonight.
Thank you, Jenny. Deb Hedger, you want to come up?
Could you do Jesse or Mason and
Oh,
I'll
sure,
go last?
sure. Why don't we start with Mason? Mason Liagat.
Hello everybody, my name is Mason Liagat. My pronouns are he, him, and I identify as a homosexual man. I'm a junior at the Half Moon Bay High School, and I've attended the Cabrillo Unified School District my whole life. So I've known that I've been gay for ever since 6th grade. And I ask your support for the proclamation to designate October as the LGBTQ History Month. So I think that this will help bring openness to the LGBTQ history. I feel accepted and supported in 2 places at my high school, one being the Peer Helpers class and the second being GSA. In every other setting and in every other class, I hear gay slurs and hurtful remarks. The teachers either choose to hear these negative comments and ignore them. And I feel alone dealing with it. I'm an athlete too, and I have been for many years in the Cabrillo district, and I also hear these hurtful gay slurs and remarks. And as a part of the school team that I've been a member of for so long. And in doing so, I think I also feel hurt and alone. The coaches also ignore the negative environment as well as the teachers. So every day, Mr. Nazar greets us with the simple phrase, "Be kind and have a nice day." And I really believe that this proclamation can help make that happen for all of the students at Cabrillo. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mason. Jesse, next.
Hi, I'm Jessie. My pronouns are she, her, and I identify as bisexual. I'm a junior at Half Moon Bay, and I support the proclamation to designate October as LGBTQ+ History Month. As you might know by now, I have 2 moms. So at home, it's been very accepting of all sexual orientations from a really young age, but I'm aware that's not like that at every house along the coast, and especially in the district. And that's why we need this proclamation, because 1, we need knowledge, especially in sexual education classes, because otherwise these kids in the LGBTQ community go looking for resources that just provide unsafe and incorrect information. Also, we need to learn how to talk about this in a respectful manner, because these aren't just things that are going to be relevant in elementary school, middle school, and high school, because they're lifelong things. It's a part of your identity. And also, we just need more normalization of it, because I don't know about you all, but when I read a book or I see a TV show, and like, let's say the main character is a girl and she falls for another girl, I'm like, whoa, she's not gonna fall for the guy? That's crazy. There's still this ingrained heteronormativity and just that straight to the default. In my mind, I'm sure it is in most of yours and most of everyone's, and that's just something that needs to be unlearned. And that can really start with this generation and the kids in this district, because they're going to be the future.
Jesse, and we'll bring up Deb.
So good evening. I'm Deb Hedger. I'm married to Jenny and mother of Jesse as well. And Jesse has attended Cabrillo since kindergarten every year except for 2. And we've been very blessed by her education in the district. She loves the high school. She's had great experiences in Cabrillo. She's currently a junior. I want to thank you all for considering the proclamation tonight. To my knowledge, it's the first time in this school district that this kind of focus has come on this issue. And I have, ever since Jesse entered this district, dedicated a lot of my life to helping ways that I could be a leader or support other leaders and work for all of the kids in the district. I was PTO president for several years at Hatch, and then on the CEF board for nearly 9 years, and president there for several years as well. And I think I got involved that way because I really deeply care about helping kids overcome the barriers to their success. And I can relate to that. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, outside of Phoenix, and spent summers in wonderful North Dakota, but there were no role models. There was zero visibility. And you would think that would have been the low mark for support for me and my identity, because then I moved to the Bay Area and I've gone to law school here. But life goes on, and still there are hard things when you are gay or lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or queer. It's just something that is so important to work with families and students at a young age to build that tolerance for diversity, the acceptance, and also a healthy sense of identity. I read that the intent of this History Month, because it is a national program, is to bring honesty and openness to LGBTQ history and focus on gay rights and civil rights. I was not going to speak tonight, but then I got to thinking, because I knew Jenny was going to speak, I thought, well, I'm pushing 60 years old. I'm getting to be a big part of this history. And so I do want to share this perspective that might be helpful to this board at this time as you take a deeper dive into these issues. As a PTO president, my platform was inclusivity. I just went there naturally, and some funny lenses came up about inclusivity that like heteronormative stuff of the father-daughter dance, or donuts with dad, muffins with mom. And I could look out right away and see the kids that had a legal guardian, or they lived with grandma, or half the kids are still on the playground because dad can't come that day because he had to go to work at 5 a.m. And it was a real struggle with the PTO board to have hard conversations that it is a loss to a family who that's the high mark for dad coming to school and having donuts with Johnny. And I admit that, it is a loss. But every time that school-sanctioned event happens, there is also a loss for a number of kids who are invisible to the hardships because they just stay away. I talk to little kids and my dad can't come, so I just don't go anywhere near the donuts. And so it was like this groundbreaking thing to have grown-ups, donuts with your grown-ups, and Jesse turned into 6th grade, and the very next year there was donuts with dad again, and a father-daughter dance. And so these things are hard to work. You can do empathy, but it just takes training and dedication and commitment and oversight and understanding what equity looks like. And when you have activities going on in a school, that you can't leave half the kids out for any reason. That's just not a good thing. So I was just going to share too that I've lost jobs because I've not been closeted. I've just given up life opportunities, and that's been my choice because I want to be where I can be all of me. And as PTO president, I was going to give my first speech, and the principal at the time at Hatch leaned over and said, "Should I be afraid of you?" And that was my launch into parent leadership at the school. And so you learn how to be self-effacing and ingratiate yourself, but really there's a lot of offensive fear and challenges that go on. And so, this type of proclamation brings light to important issues, and light heals, and this issue needs more light in Cabrillo, and I thank you for your time. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Deb. And thank you all for sharing your stories and your perspectives. It means a lot. So we will, I will ask for a motion to approve, and then we'll go to discussion. I was going to motion to approve, and then second, and we'll go roll call if there's not discussion or questions or comments. So, motion to approve? So moved. Okay, do we have a second? Second. Okay, Lizette, second. Okay, so we can open to comments or questions from folks, and then we'll go to vote. Comments or questions? Anybody?
I just want to say thank you very much for the comments from Deb and Jenny and Jesse and Mason, and just how incredibly brave it is for all of you to come up and speak. And I just really appreciate it from my heart that you are here and speaking, and that this is happening. And I'm sorry that it's been this long, but I'm glad it's happening now. And I do think that, you know, watching the history, I do think we've come a long way, and I think that there is more to grow. And I think that this is the beginning of that step moving forward. And I do think that the youth are an incredible answer for that. I learned from my own children, and we all can learn as we learn to become more inclusive and understanding. So thank you very much.
I as well ditto and echo what Freya said, and thank you for your time and sharing your personal experiences. I work with juvenile probation, and I deal with a lot of these kids who, beyond, you know, the legal reasons why they're there, they also face a lot of just fear, and frustration, and just lack of just feeling like they can feel safe and they can be themselves. And it's very frustrating because these are amazing, incredible, bright, and just overall just great human beings. And me, on a personal level, one of the reasons why I am here, one of my greatest mentors is also lesbian. So it was never, I never saw her in any different light. I didn't think of her any different other way, just as an amazing human being. And I think we need to honor that, and thank you for having this.
Comments or questions? I'll just echo the thanks to everybody for being here and speaking and making real. You know, of course it's real, and I appreciate, Sean, that you read through the proclamation, because every bit of it, like, you could read it 5 times and it's like, oh yeah, and that, and that. And just to add to Deb's comment, I think you bring up a really good point about, like, the persistence that we'll need for all of these fronts, be it immigrants or be it LGBTQ or Jewish heritage or whatever, you know, what have you, whatever element of diversity inclusion we're talking about. I feel like sometimes it is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We'll try to increase that ratio towards the forward direction, but that persistence and you know, keeping going forward is going to be essential. So it's wonderful to have the Coastside Pride group now here on the coast. That was like awesome. I was just so thrilled to see that come about. So thank you for all that you're doing. Okay, so with that, we will go to roll call vote, and I'm going to alternate just to change it up a little bit. So Freya, why don't you start? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, passes 5 plus 1 to 0. Thank you.
I just do want to say, as a point of order, this does declare October as LGBTQ History Month, and it does ask us to work with our schools on implementation of AB 677 to encourage schools to collect voluntary self-identification information. That's where the rubber meets the road regarding sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. And when I hear young people talk about their experiences and feeling othered or not feeling safe, we need to do work on that. I will ask principals to hang this proclamation in all our schools so that people are aware of our responsibilities and our moral compass going forward to take care of one another. And I just want to say I thank the board, I thank my colleagues, and I will share that being a father to a son with lesbian mothers, this is very important to me. I want to thank Coast Pride. This is a very important moment, I think, for us all to be able to make that step forward, and I hope our young people can benefit and our families can benefit and our community can benefit from it. I think there's another proclamation I need to do.
I was going to say, don't sit down, because next item is item 15C. Adopt resolution number 17-19 endorsing September 2019 as Attendance Awareness Month.
So I'll just open this by saying attendance is so important. Oh my gosh, you must be present to win. And we need people to attend school, and our funding depends upon it, and our kids' learning depends on it. So this is endorsing September 2019 as Attendance Awareness Month. Whereas good attendance is essential to student achievement and graduation, and we're committed to dedicating our resources and attention to reducing chronic absenteeism rates with a focus starting as early as kindergarten. And whereas chronic absence, missing 10% or more of school for any reason, including excused or unexcused absences, or just 2 or 3 days a month, is a proven predictor of academic trouble and dropout rates. And whereas improving attendance and reducing chronic absence takes commitment, collaboration, tailored approaches to particular challenges and strengths in each community, and whereas chronic absence predicts lower third grade reading proficiency, course failure, and eventual dropout, it weakens our communities and our local economy, and whereas the impact of chronic absence hits low-income students and children of color particularly hard if they don't have the resources to make up for lost time in the classroom and are more likely to face systemic barriers to getting to school, such as unreliable transportation, lack of access to health care, unstable or unaffordable housing. And whereas chronic absence exacerbates the achievement gap that separates low-income students from their peers, since students from low-income families are both more likely to be chronically absent and more likely to be affected academically by missing school, absenteeism also undermines efforts to improve struggling schools, since it's hard to measure improvement in classroom instruction if students are not in class to benefit from them. And whereas schools and community partners can reach out more frequently to absent students to determine why they're missing school and what would help them attend more regularly, and whereas school and districts must do more to track, calculate, and share the data on how many students are chronically absent so we can deliver the right intervention to the right students, and whereas all students, even those who show up regularly, are affected by chronic absence because teachers must spend time reviewing for students who missed lessons, and whereas chronic absence can be significantly reduced when schools, parents, and communities work together to monitor and promote good attendance and address hurdles that keep children from getting to school. Now, therefore, be it resolved that as the governing board of the Cabrillo Unified School District proclaim our schools will stand with the nation in recognizing September as Attendance Awareness Month, we hereby commit to focusing on reducing chronic absenteeism to give all children an equitable opportunity to learn, to grow, and to thrive academically, emotionally, and socially.
Thank you, Sean. Do we have a motion to approve? Do you have a second? Comments or questions?
I just have one comment. I believe that attendance is very important, but I also really wanted to call out one of the last lines in our resolution, which is address hurdles that keep children from getting to school. I really think that this is vitally important rather than a kind of more punitive or sending letters that say, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. I think that there are oftentimes reasons that people aren't making it to school that have to do with social and emotional or other issues, poverty or things happening with their family, and I think that as much as possible we can address those hurdles that are stopping children from getting to school. It will increase their academic performance all around as well, so I just wanted to call that part out.
And
Staff will continue to work on trying to make this about getting kids to school and not giving them more reason to reject school or feel rejected or some kind of punitive. So staff will continue to work on that.
All right, comments or questions?
I have a comment. I agree with a lot of what has been said, but I also think that there's other extra circumstances, and I myself have throughout all these years pulled out my daughter at a certain time that is not in summer for financial and family reasons, and we do leave the country, and as much as I try to not do it, it really for personal and just other reasons, financially as well, I do it, and I do agree it does have an impact, but it's also it's also really important, and it's something that I have a hard time, like, with this resolution on a personal level, but I completely agree as well with a lot of what has been said.
And let us know, Sean, I think is, the spirit of this resolution to encourage and inform, and knowing that there will be accommodations made for situations where, administration or teachers are working with students and their families, for cases where that is, ultimately the family is going to make a decision. But that part of this idea is that we have education about the importance, and then they're informed on multiple sides of the decision.
Yeah, I think certainly going forward, hearing this discussion from this board, staff will work to revising this resolution. This is a resolution that's recurring. It's probably in line with the national thinking, and I think our thinking has advanced, and I think we do need to include language that reflects that there are different needs, and that we come at it with an attempt to not demonize absences, or but instead work on making ourselves aware of attendance and lack thereof, and being aware of how we can help regardless, in our student attendance review boards or what have you, in our communication with families, about how we can be more encouraging and less punishing or demonizing.
Thank you so much. Okay, if we're ready, we'll proceed to roll call vote. Start with Mary Beth. Aye. Aye. Passes 5+1 to 0. Thank you, everybody. Okay, item 15D, approved contract agreement for Big Lift Coastside Literacy Collaborative Coordinator. Is this Sean or Leticia?
Dr. Bhatia can speak to this.
I am new here. I also have been here about 2 months. Oh, I'm sorry.
There we go. Good evening, members of the board, community. And this board item tonight is in regards to a Big Lift job posting. And as Mr. Crawford mentioned earlier, we have multiple types of funding sources. And we're lucky to continue to receive Big Lift funds from a social venture that we engaged in about 6 years ago. We have, the Big Lift social venture has confirmed funding for the next 2 years, and they continue to try to raise more funds. Last year, we are allocated $160,000 for the regular year Big Lift budget. In the summer, that's $99,000. But right now, I just want to focus on the $160K for regular year Big Lift spending. Last year, in 18-19, there was about $40,000 that were not allocated to obtain a reimbursement. So we basically only had $120,000 worth. As we mentioned, there was a director of categorical that is no longer here at the district, so we were able, because that position did do some of the Big Lift work, we were lucky and we were able to utilize some of that position and be able to reimburse ourselves the entire $160,000. However, this year, because that position is no longer here, we do have to repurpose that $40,000, and right now there are 7 districts in San Mateo County, out of the 22 districts in San Mateo County, where we have a Big Lift coordinator. because we are a small district, we created a job description. It is a community engagement, early childhood and special programs supervisor, and a large part of.
Are you on D or E?
Yeah. Okay, the Big Lift Coordinator Agreement.
So this is the,
It's the same.
the introduction probably applies to both. For
Yes.
Sure. So D is the collaborative
It
coordinator.
is the same, it is the same.
The same introduction.
So we are adding 2 positions, so we're talking about the coordinator, we're increasing, we would like to engage in a contract for $15,000 for Big Lift. The contract is $30,000. The other $15,000 of the contract, we are utilizing and supporting low-performing student block grants, some of the dyslexia work that Dr. Wade is using. And this is a contract to continue Dr. Elizabeth Shuck as head coordinator for the Big Lift. So you see the contract for $30,000, $15,000 of the contract for Big Lift. The other $15,000 we're using low-performing student block grant to support Dr. Wade's work with dyslexia, as well as MTSS work.
Very good. Do we have a motion to approve?
So I had.
We have to have a motion to approve. Do you want to make a motion to approve? We'll get there faster than the questions. Thank you. Do we have a second? Okay, now we can open up the discussion and questions. Kimberly.
Okay, because it's Big Lift Coordinator Agreement, if I understand, so this funding comes from the Big Lift funds.
Yes.
And I just heard you explain that it's 50% Big Lift funds and 50% this block grant funds that are available. How does this intertwine with the special program supervisor job description?
The special programs.
Is
the
it
next
different?
one.
Are
It's
these-
different. There are 2 different. One is a stipend for some of the community engagement in the meeting that Trustee Cortez attended. Liz Shuck will help with some of that work. 50% of the coordinator is focused on Big Lift.
Okay.
So then to clarify that the coordinator position, 50% is around Big Lift coordination, like that's those monthly meetings, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then it's 50% of it's more around like dyslexia, MTSS support, so that's
Yes.
where the rationale, like the funding sources comes from.
Yes.
And then for the second, the job description, job posting item, the next item on B, community engagement, early childhood and special program supervisor. Can you just give us like a summary about what that job's for?
Yes. And the summary of this job, it is a multi-funded job. So we're going to divide into 3 different portions. A third of it will be funded by migrant education funds. And that work will continue to support migrant education and basically our community engagement. Another third of the position for community engagement, early childhood and special program supervisor will be funded by the Big Lift. And this is where we needed to fill that 40K gap, because last year we were not going to reimburse ourselves for $40,000. And when I came in about 2 months ago, we said, no, we're going to find something, and our Big Lift partners allowed us to look at other expenditures that were utilized last year. And of course, like I had mentioned earlier, my apologies, different position. I had mentioned earlier the position of the director of categorical before we're able to utilize some of that base fund and use some of the work that position did. But the position no longer exists, so we had to submit a budget to the Big Lift, and that is where we included the Big Lift community engagement, early childhood and special programs supervisor. So that's a third, Big Lift. And then the last third of the position, it will be funded by the It's Title V. Title V is preschool. We receive funding from San Mateo County in addition to migrant education and the Big Lift. So we're trying to make sure we get as creative as possible to support positions. This will not affect the general fund. This will not affect LCFF. These are all funds, grants, and categorical funds that will be utilized for the position.
Can I just ask a question, if I may? Dr. Patia, you did meet with representatives from the Big Lift and review this expenditure, right?
Yes, and actually they were very glad that we did that because we were one of the districts that didn't have, most districts have about a 60% position, up to 100% position to support the Big Lift initiative. And so they were in full support of us adding this position to make sure that we were at par of the level of coordination with the other 7 districts within San Mateo County.
So the 2 positions will work together on Big Lift?
Yes.
As well as each will have other responsibilities?
That is correct.
And their supervisor will be you?
Yes. Well, should I have to turn my mic on?
Just to reiterate that, yes, it will be Big Lift funds, multi-funded. Both this first one, the Coastside Literacy Collaborative Coordinator, would do Big Lift and also would work on dyslexia using Low Performing Student Grant. And then the other one would work on Community Engagement Early Childhood Special Program Supervisor, but all of them are funded in part by Big Lift funds and by other funds. And again, nothing from the general fund. This is considered by Big Lift a best practice in the county.
And the follow-up question was that they would all then be supervised by Leticia?
By me, yes.
So I guess the wonderment I would have is by knowing that we're facing a number of cuts and knowing how teachers are very much stressed, I question hiring additional people to the district when there might be the potential of stipends for other qualified teachers. Having worked in other districts, there were frequently opportunities for teachers to take on coordinator type, more advanced, beyond classroom duties. And I can't help but think maybe we have other qualified people as I read the descriptions. And so I just want to acknowledge that while this is funded with these other outside funds, we need to be sensitive to the whole system. And while this may be the answer right now, I would ask that we consider how we right-size expectations and who best to fill these positions long-term.
Of course. And again, this position is a temporary position because, as I mentioned earlier, the funds are only guaranteed for 2 years. If the funding goes away and Big Lift doesn't raise enough funds, the position will not continue. We hope that's not the case. Migrant education is pretty stable. We don't know with the recent news that we received with jobs that are being closed that might affect, again, the position. But yes, we'll keep that into consideration for the future. Thank you.
Any other final questions or comments? Okay, then we will move to a vote for, I guess, let's do E first, then we'll officially open, we'll do D first and then officially open E, and then probably they actually work well, they work really well together, but we'll go now for D, the contract agreement for Big Lift Coastside Literacy Collaborative Coordinator. This can be an en masse vote, so all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes 5+1 to 0. So now we will officially open item E, 15E. Approval of job description and job posting, community engagement, early childhood and special program supervisor. Leticia, anything else to add to what we just discussed? For formalities of process.
We thank you for your support, and not to make things more complicated, but I did want to point out one thing. It says community engagement, early childhood. So the position is very focused on preschool. Right now we have only 2 classes. And Dr. Wade has done an amazing job with the county to engage in a grant, because would be the only way for us to continue to increase supports. And it's a preschool inclusion, preschool grant that we might get. And so this position, if we do get the funding, we hope that this position can engage in some of that work so that we can offer a bigger preschool and be a model in the county for an inclusive classroom.
I guess, motion please to move forward. So motion to approve. Okay, second. Any other questions or comments? I just have a quick question. So that what you just mentioned, Leticia, would be incremental to this position, or that would substitute the funding to this position? That would be the Title V funding that you referred to?
That's new, we're engaging in a grant.
Okay.
We are engaging in a grant, and so this position will help with any growth of our preschool programs.
Okay, got it. It would allow you to grow. Okay. If there are no further questions or comments, we'll go to en masse vote for this one. Item 15F. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes 5 + 1 to 0. Okay, thank you very much. All right, so that brings us to 15F, adopt resolution numbers 1819, 1919, and 2019 for employees assigned on the basis of an educational code provision.
Thank you. This is an item from HR. We bring this every year when we have employees that are assigned outside of their credential. We ask the board for approval for each one of these resolutions, which specifies specific teachers that are serving in positions outside of their credential, and we ask for your approval for each resolution separately. So do you want to go through each one?
Yeah, if you want to introduce all of them, then we can, after your introduction.
Okay, because it's a roll call vote is how we do this one? Is how it's presented here?
This is a resolution, so do we need to, I guess we should probably go roll call for each one, huh? Okay, so let's do why don't we do, maybe finish introducing them, and then we'll just do a separate roll, like a conversation together and a separate roll call for everything.
Okay. So this particular one is a committee on assignment. This particular resolution pertains to Pat Olson at Half Moon Bay High School, and his assignment is district broadcasting. So we therefore resolve that Pat Olson has met the requirements of Ed Code 44258.7C and is approved to teach in this specific assignment.
Good, okay. And I would suggest, why don't you introduce all 3 of them, and then we can have a conversation about all 3 together, and then just go to roll call vote separately, since they're one item here.
Okay. This this authorization applies to Tom Cox at Cunha, and his assignment is leadership. Now therefore it be it resolved that Tom Cox has met the requirements of Title V 80005B and are approved to teach in this specific assignment. And the third one is authorization for multiple subject and standard elementary teaching credentials, Mary Coyle at Cunha, teaching art, and Lisa Longacre at Cunha, teaching physical education. Therefore be it resolved that Mary Coyle and Lisa Longacre have met the requirements of Ed Code 44256B and are approved to teach in their specific assignments.
Very good. Okay, so we have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second? Questions or comments? Seems there are none, we will move to roll call vote, and we will do each one separately. So we'll start with number 1819. We'll start with Freya. Aye. Aye. Okay, passes 5 + 1 to 0. Next we'll go to 1919. We'll start with Mary Beth. Aye. Okay, passes 5 + 1 to 0. And thirdly, 2019, we'll getting confused now with this new system. We'll start with Freya. Aye. Okay, passes 5 + 1 to 0. Thank you, Holly. Okay, so item 15G, approve the San Mateo County Office of Education review of the CUSD CSEA tentative agreement, San Mateo County Public Disclosure of Collective Bargaining Agreement. And is this Sean? 15G?
Sure. Just in short, as you know, it was negotiated previously, and we submitted Assembly AB 1200 form describing the impact of what the raise retroactive for CSEA would be that was negotiated in June. With all full disclosure, I shared with CSEA and other interested stakeholders that this was a difficult AB 1200 to sign, knowing the budget cuts that we are facing. However, in the name of fairness and parity and the idea of Me Too, we did do this and sign this, knowing that it results in increased cuts, but we do believe that CSEA members were negotiated this in good faith. And basically what you have here is an approval letter from San Mateo County Office of Education that says, we approve your AB 1200. We know you'll have to cut more dollars for it. We think that's fair to CSEA members to bring them into parity with CUTA members who also receive the same raise. Basically, we're hoping you're going to approve this. We're recommending you approve this so that we can proceed to get those people paid what was negotiated in good faith in June.
Do you have a motion to approve? Okay, so motion to approve Kim, second Freya. Questions or comments? Seeing as there are none, we'll move to vote. So all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes 5+1 to 0. All right, 15, actually, we're gonna pause for the agenda and request a motion for exceeding our curfew, which is 10 o'clock, which we need to do. So I anticipate that is a strong possibility at this point. We have a motion to exceed our curfew. Second. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Passes 5+1 to 0. Okay, so now we'll resume with the regular agenda. Item 15H, adopt resolution number 21-19, approve the GAN limit. Chip?
All right. This has been in place since the late 70s. The GAN limit's been actually upgraded or changed a few times along the way. It sort of lacks the luster it started out with, but it's one of those paper requirements that we need to do every year with the budget. The detail formulas, if you want to see them, is in the audited actual report on it, and we're within the appropriation limits, so we're fine.
All right, we have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second? Is that second? Questions or comments? Seeing as there are none, we'll move to roll call vote, and start with Mary Beth.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay, passes 5+1 to 0. Thanks, Jim. All right, item 15I, adopt resolution number 22-19, blanket authority to bid fiscal year 2019 to 2020. Jim again?
Sure. So, this is a pretty common practice in most districts. They have a resolution. There's a limit on 50,000, so small contracts don't have to wait for the board meeting, come and approve and get things rolling and moving. And larger construction change orders, running up to about 300,000, I believe is the number in here, is also a common number for that. It looks like when I came to the district, that's been past practice. There's nothing in writing. We're trying to make it more official now. So we put this resolution, developed it, and brought it to you this evening.
Very good, thank you so much. Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Questions or comments?
Point of order, if I may, a comment. I just want to point out that the good thing about this is it does provide more fiscal oversight by the board and provides a control by the board, especially during times like these, so that you are not saddled with costs that you didn't know you were going to incur.
So just to summarize kind of the bottom line, it's basically saying that the district staff can go ahead and request bids, but for contracts over $50,000, those must come to the board. And it basically codifies that general practice from the past. And presumably that includes, they come to the board before the project work starts, ideally.
You don't split it into two 30K elements.
There will always be some times when we're going to do a certain piece of work and then come back and do another piece of work. But yes, this is about control.
Okay, very good, thank you. If there are no further comments or questions, we'll proceed to roll call vote. Again, this might be a record for resolutions. We've had meetings with a lot. Freya? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes 5+1 to 0. All right, thank you. 15I, adopt resolution number 23-19, Joint Powers Authority Membership School Project for Utility Rate Reduction.
So this is an organization that's been around for quite a while, maybe 20 plus years now. We haven't been a member. They started off with natural gas purchase, bring costs down for school districts and colleges throughout California. I think there's over 500 district members to date in the group. By joining this, we'll still get our natural gas through PG&E pipeline, but we'll actually buy the gas with all the other members up in Canada. Spur does, puts it into the pipeline, and we get two bills basically, one from Spur for gas and one from PG&E for using their pipeline. It should save 3 to 5%. It's not a big saving issue, but it also opens up the door of other features that Spur has. Down the road, they have a program for buying energy, and if we're able to get into that, it's somewhat limited, but if we get into that, we can buy our electricity sort of the same manner. You rent the wires from PG&E, and you buy your electricity from out of state from the supplier on it. And there's a number of bids they do. They do for technology, phone systems, networking systems, solar panels, other energy projects as well. They've done statewide bids. And if you're a member, you can piggyback off those bids and those prices down the line. So it brings in some other options to the district down the road.
We'll go to, motion to approve. Second. Questions or comments?
Is there any chance that it being part of this consortium or this organization that rates would increase for something?
Out of their history, I've never seen them go above PG&E's rates. And I've been in many districts over 20 plus years with the group. So they buy their gas usually 6 months to a year in advance, and so they get prices early on it. PG&E has to, they got current prices and back prices, and the way it's structured to make sure there's always gas in California, they have to actually pay more on it, is how it tends to work out. So by us buying as a group and buying early, we get a price break on it. And I haven't ever seen it happen where we have to pay more. If it starts going the opposite way, we can always opt out of the group as well.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments? Sean?
Just a comment too, just to frame this for the public, this does give us the opportunity to do piggybacking with other districts on what Mr. Crawford said, so that we could look at increased energy savings that would then go to the bottom line, or if we were to use bond funds, facilities funds for these kind of energy infrastructure projects, that would be money that would come out of facilities and give us back to the general fund, which could help us with our budget woes or for employee salaries and benefits going forward.
Thank you. All right, if there are no other questions or comments, we'll move to a roll call vote. No further questions or comments. A roll call vote. Start with Freya. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Passes 5+1 to 0. All right, item 15K, approve 2018 to 19 unaudited actuals financial report. Mr. Jim again.
Yeah, not really much to add on this one since we've done the presentation.
Very good. Motion to approve. A second. Questions or comments? Yeah, that's a comment, right? Okay, we will move to en masse vote for this. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes 5+1 to 0. Okay, 15L, approved to award contract for tennis courts project, Half Moon Bay High School.
Do you want me to lead on this? I'll lead on this. Mr. Crawford and I discovered that there was a project that had been initiated as far as receiving bids for some work at the tennis courts at Half Moon Bay High School. This was done in conjunction with Coastside Tennis Association, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. They were incorporated in 2012 at the request of the superintendent at that time in order to enter into an MOU with the CUSD established that same year. That MOU was revised in 2015. That is an MOU with the Coastside Tennis Association that remains in place until either party chooses to cancel or update, edit the agreement. Annual meetings in January held with the high school principal, Mr. Nazar, and CTA, Coastside Tennis Association management to discuss court maintenance. The MOU allows the Coastside Tennis Association use of courts in exchange for them being responsible for maintenance and managing scheduling the court's activities. That includes maintaining a schedule on the website of all activities, including school activities. And the high school and Cabrillo always has priority. They have priority when it comes to court usage. The Coastside Tennis Association raises money through its member dues, donations, and court usage fees charged to 2 approved local tennis pros who pay the Coastside Tennis Association a per-hour court usage fee, and those fees are used to help pay for court maintenance costs. And the Coastside Tennis Association makes sure that other tennis pros are not teaching and charging fees at the court. So in effect, they help police the courts for that type of abuse. They spend approximately $4,000 to $6,000 annually on court maintenance, and that includes shrub and weed trimming, new nets, maintaining a porta potty, court sweeping and washing, and miscellaneous repairs. Their annual revenue ranges from $9,000 to $12,000 a year. They paid for the 2011 court resurface, which included installing asphalt walkway around the north and east side of the courts. That project cost approximately $27,000. They paid for new halogen light bulbs and new light ballast in 2016 for a cost of $12,000. They recently paid $3,000 for weed and shrub trimming, and they basically think that their financial outlay since 2012 was close to $80,000, and that does not account for the volunteer hours that the Coastside Tennis Association members put into the high school courts, meaning scheduling, working with school staff, implementing elementary school tennis program, their regular board meetings, meeting with contractors, holding fundraising tournaments, et cetera, et cetera. They have said that they would have an ongoing maintenance, commitment to ongoing maintenance, and that would still be about $5,000 annually, and they would need to resurface the courts in approximately 7 to 10 years, and they're committed to paying the resurface expense, about $25,000 at that time, and they budget with it any annual surplus they have year to year. I just want to provide all this information to you about the Coastside Tennis Association because David Val Fernelius, who is their president, emailed me about this when I asked him about this. The options, if you do not pass this contract or consider wanting to waive, would be to repaint or paint the resurface. That's about $30,000, but it won't prevent surface recracking, or to demolish the entire court, including court foundation, start all over again. And they say that estimated cost is close to $500,000. Again, they have decided to contribute $15,000 to this project. That's what they thought they could afford out of approximately $27,000 in the bank. When they talked to staff, I was not involved in the negotiation, neither was Mr. Crawford, but we got the contract and the bid, and we're passing this forward for you for your consideration. And I would recommend you discuss it because it is a large contract, and staff's all ears about how you want us to proceed.
Sean, Jim, anything to add, or otherwise we can go to a motion to approve? Second? Second. Okay. Questions and comments?
So the MOU was in 2015.
That is correct.
Could we have an updated MOU?
I would recommend that we update the MOU, not only with this group, but with any group that is using a district facility. I think that would be best practice going forward, yes.
Because I feel we, since we are in a crisis of money, it's important for us to really make sure that we do get money for our, the use of our facilities. And I'm not all clear on this, but it's 200 and they're only gonna pay 15?
That is correct.
And we're paying the rest.
That was what was negotiated by previous staff members in the district. And bringing it to you today, we want to make sure you have this information. It is a long-standing practice for the Coastside Tennis Association to use those courts during the day for their purposes in trade, if you will, by the MOU that was organized in 2012 and then 2015 for their maintenance of the courts. But this is an extreme, I won't say extreme, but this is a large capital project. I do want to say, as far as budget crisis goes, of course this would come out of bond monies, but the thing that I find of note and of interest and of discussion for you would be, we are trying to do a facilities master plan to prioritize use of bond funding, and thus this has to come to your approval.
I just want to put in perspective also that it's not just CTA, but there are many ad hoc tennis groups that use it, some overlap. And some of the tennis groups, I'm hearing secondhand, don't necessarily find the surfaces to be unplayable at this time, and recognize the fiscal constraints of the district. So this is not necessarily a unanimous perceived need in the tennis player community. And I really appreciate, John, the kind of getting the history of what CTA has put in, and it's certainly $4,000 to $6,000 a year, or a $12,000. You know, those pieces are really, really important and appreciated by the district. At the same time, if this is the group that's has that heavy use, in some ways that's almost like the rent on it, because I don't think there is a rent per se. And I would find it difficult to think that $15K contribution against $280K for what was proposed here is not the right balance. And that, you know, look at what happened to, we have a beautiful track at the high school, but there was a big fundraising campaign for that.
The percentage of the contribution for the track was comparably small as this one here, because it cost us $3-4 million to redo the track, and they contributed $250,000.
Well, but 200,000, even 200,000
compared to $3 or $4 million was the cost.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. But I would also argue that our in terms of students that use the track and field, there's probably, that hits a higher percentage of our students than our tennis team at the high school. And this isn't a lot of outside use. So I'm concerned.
Oh, I was just going to ask Sean a basic question. Was it, are there any safety concerns raised about the courts at this time?
The president of Coastside Tennis Association says there are cracks on the surface. The word safety doesn't come up in the email to him. I will tell you, from him, I will tell you that I reached out when I found out that this was coming for us because the bid had been done and the contract had been approved. I reached out to him, I linked in with him, I called him at his workplace. He was nice enough to call me back, and we had a long talk. I did voice to him that I wanted to give him a courtesy call because I recognized that I was not aware of the negotiation and I didn't know what was going to happen. And I thought that was doing my due diligence and being a responsible steward of your money and providing you with decision-making authority. So I have not seen the word safety, but I think the assumption is that the court would be better and it would have longer life. Again, that said, it must be my responsibility, as you've heard me say in other board meetings, that you have a nice bond, but you need a facilities master plan in order to spend that bond wisely. I think there are many examples of the district having phenomenal facilities, and those facilities not necessarily being paid for by their users. When you are looking at a situation where expenses exceed revenues, you have to think about revenues that you are collecting from community users. And that is part and parcel of facilities management and facilities rentals. So it's up to the board. You can do as you wish, but I did want to bring the Coastside Tennis Association perspective. I did not read the word safety in there, but it is for optimal play. But I think I've heard Ms. Hines say that there are other tennis players that, and I have visited the court. Certainly Mr. Nazar could speak to this better than I could. I mean, he's got players playing on that court. But I think this is a wonderful relationship that benefits the Coastside Tennis Association. They benefit elementary school people. They benefit all kinds of kids and families. However, it does cost you something. And it has to be my responsibility to tell you it's going to cost you, what it's going to cost you, and for you to determine what the appropriate resource mix is.
So basically what we're saying is that we could possibly charge a rental and that would go to our general fund and use the bond money to fix it. That's another way we could, which would help our financial.
I'm sorry, I got the gist of your question, I think. I do not believe that if we collected the money on facilities rental that that would go to the general fund. I believe that would go to facilities, would it not, Mr. Crawford?
No, you can put that in the general fund.
Oh, we could put it in the general fund?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's...
If we're collecting a rent for the facility.
Okay, I always assumed that would go into facilities fund.
No, you can go in the general.
Oh, that's a very astute question, Ms. Alexander.
Well, thank you.
Very good question.
Oh, I had one other thing. I forgot now. No, I know. Forgot. Go ahead, Freya. I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I guess I'm in support of this contract. I agree that we do need to do a facility master plan, but as yet we haven't done that. And this was negotiated and agreed before. And I do believe that there is a need. I have spoken to folks who do tennis at the high school students, the high school coach, and they definitely perceive that need for this. So I feel like it feels a little bit similar to if we were to go back on other agreements that had already been made. It feels like it would be kind of burning a bridge with a community partner that, although maybe they're not paying the highest fee for the use, they are providing the maintenance, which is a significant cost out of our general funds for other facilities. And so I think that although we could look at the MOU moving forward in terms of costs and benefits, I would recommend going forward with this project. I think that again, it's about equivalent to some of the other percentages that we've had in partnering with organizations in the community. And I guess I believe that the school district and the property that we have is under the Community Facilities Act, and given the nature of the coast, it's one of our primary areas for recreation on the coast. And I really strongly support that, and I believe it should be as accessible as possible. And so I feel like this is a relatively small amount in regards to our other bond amounts. And we should move forward with this project. And the fee issue, I think we've discussed numerous times over the years, and we can kind of go over some of that history. But I personally side on reducing the fees to community partners who need to use those facilities because there are no other county or other facilities on the coast side for recreation. And the vital importance that it is, not just for our students, but for our whole community, our seniors, our other adults. And I think as much as we can, we should provide that service. So I would advocate for supporting this.
I was just going to say, I would agree that our facility should be accessible, and it's not about being crazy about charging fees, and that what CTA's contributed really is valuable. on those pieces. I guess I just had I wasn't aware of the size of this contract, and it's, what the resolution that we just passed before, it's like bringing forth 280K, make a decision right now, I don't know. And if it was in something else under consent and I missed it, I'm sorry, but that's, in terms of priorities and timing, I just didn't know what the timing of the need was.
I think that's where I'm coming from as well, is I feel like this should be something that we continue to discuss. I just feel like particularly at this point in time with our circumstances, and I recognize fully these are two separate pots of money, I get that, but $250,000 is still a lot of community money, no matter what way you slice it. And if 280, I think it's 265, and then they're going to pay 15 or something like that. It's around plus or minus 250 for us, from our money, which is a considerable amount of money, and not a lot compared to a $15 million building. But I feel like we need to make sure that it's needed for our school facilities, first and foremost. Our remit, as much as I want to collaborate and support our community, we're not a recreational district. So I'm sensitive to that as far as what the bond is for, first and foremost. So for me, I'm not comfortable at this point, and I feel the idea of a facilities master plan is critically important to make sure that we have a lot of money, but it goes pretty quickly. We all know that. So to me, unless it's an urgent project because of safety or student need, my recommendation would be to hold off on anything like above $50,000 in general, which this is well above that. So that's my thought.
I guess I just advocate, I believe it is for student need. I believe that the tennis team needs a new court. That's what I've heard.
My question is, if we did wait for the facility master's plan to look at it, what's the timeline for that?
I think your facilities master plan is going to take several months because we'll have to do community engagement. Again, the board has the prerogative to approve the contract and to approve the project as it is currently structured. You have the ability to not approve the project. It came to us. I want to be responsible. I'm agnostic about it. I serve at the pleasure of the board, but I also think it is my responsibility and duty to tell you what the facts are, which is why I just read the CTA president's email pretty much verbatim. I do think you are in a situation where arrangements have been made previously that cost you money and that MOUs need to be looked at for all facility users. I think you are not maximizing your revenues that could apparently, it's a surprise to me, go into the general fund as rent. I think you should be looking at saving money, gaining money, looking at revenues. This is an object lesson for it. I could go either way. I'm not going to lose sleep over it, but you have to represent the people, your constituents and the people you serve, and there are trade-offs.
I'd just like to reiterate that, this was a process that happened before, and my understanding is that the tennis team at the high school was involved in this contract. So we're not just talking about CTA doing this, we're talking about our own students and our own need for tennis. So I just want to reiterate that I understand the desire to have the master facility plan and to have some pre-approval of this, and I think that maybe there was some errors in the past with communication about this ahead, which should have been done before this came to us. I just feel that now that all this process has already gone forward, that it is in our best interest to go ahead and approve this as is, but learn the lesson moving forward with projects. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I guess my last comment is I just don't see the rush to move forward right now at this time. It's not a safety issue. It's not an egregious thing where any common person, we're hearing mixed feedback. So that's my thing is not no, but maybe just not yet.
If I may direct staff, Mr. Nazar, can you approach the podium and speak to your understanding of whether or not this is a safety issue? I know that I've talked to Mr. Crawford about this, we may have to go back out to bid for it. I think only one person went to bid for this, only one contractor, so you don't have a competitive bid, you only had one bid. They look like they have bona fides and they have other projects that they did in San Francisco, et cetera. But Mr. Nazar, do you want to speak to the safety issue? Well, of course, there's a benefit to, I mean, we could talk about how many students are on the tennis team, et cetera, et cetera. Mr. Nazar, please.
Okay, I'll do my best on this one. Yeah, we do actually have two tennis teams. In this fall right now is our women's tennis team. I think there's 17, 18 players on that. We also use it for physical education, tennis, pickleball. So the courts are used fairly extensively throughout the entire school year, and then in the spring, the boys team comes up and plays on the courts. In addition, I host a lot of our matches for Cunha at the high school because the number of courts allows more kids to participate at one time. I did meet with them a number of times around this project, and it's really looking at if you say, is there a real danger right this moment? Probably not. However, from what I understand, and I'm not an expert in tennis courts, the courts could be, if we lay off on this one, the chance of it becoming more damaged and becoming more pronounced in the cracks would lead to that. And this is a way to basically address the issue now before the bigger problem. So if it gets too significant, the courts would have to be, like they said, demolished and redone. This is what they call a membrane that lays down on top of it, and is about half of the cost, but it should last about 30 years. So if we look at for the amount of money, we might have 30 years of really good use, and they are maintaining the courts. All we'll have to do is stripe it and those things, but we'll have courts that are playable and safe and of good quality for quite a few years, from what I understand.
Thank you.
In light of that too, which is kind of a preventative measure, it sounds like, rather than having to start over again, which would be more expensive, I also do feel like, this might be a little bit reneging and starting some bad blood, since we did already have this agreement, and maybe, we maybe should look at it again going forward. But I do feel like this was something that was kind of already in place, and I would vote to go ahead with it too, based on that.
My only thing is, I'd like to see a current MOU, because it's not just pocket change. I get it that it's, there are more expensive things, and then the other thing is, there's only one bid. What if we could get, it done for less amount of money? I get what, I understand, the kids benefit from it, but it's kind of hard when you see schools that have portables that, like, for example, Granada, they haven't even been touched. They're rusting. And I get it that, the court serves the kids and the community, but I'm having a hard time just saying yes when there's other schools that, really need attention. And we're talking about the kids. I don't know.
I just would like us not to think of it as an either or. We're moving forward with the master facility plan, and my understanding last year was that there were architectural plans being begun for El Granada and for Fairlawn View, which has always been the intent. So I guess I wouldn't want to put this against that, because that's not the situation.
And we have been upgrades on different campuses in terms of the outdoor facilities on a regular basis, kind of rotating too.
I'll just say, I do think this is an interesting conversation. I think it's important. It's important to see the board sort of wrestle with these ideas, especially when it has to do with money and the benefit of cui bono, who benefits, and looking out for the collective. I think this is a fascinating conversation, and I certainly will revisit the idea of an MOU if it's the majority of the board, for me to update the MOU with this party and with any party going forward.
Are there or comments or questions? All right, we will move to vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I'm not eyeing, so I will, so you're not eyeing? Okay, so, and, so I catch, Lauren, you said aye? Okay, so 3 plus 1 to 2 is the vote. Okay, very good. Moving on to the next item. Excuse me?
It passes, and thank you for your careful deliberation on that. And again, I just want to point out to the public that the board governance protocols say that board members should be encouraged to vote their mind, speak their mind, vote no, and explain why they voted no. And it is healthy for this board to, at some times, not have a unanimous vote.
Indeed, it's in our governance manual, as we discussed today. Very good, thank you. All right, so.
Add a comment to that. It's
Yes.
it's actually official on our governance
Yeah.
handbook. Because when we met, that was one of my questions. I kind of said, will I go to hell if I say no? So it's official. I won't go to hell, and
It's good. Differences of opinion are a healthy thing.
Viva
here
la
in
democracy.
Exactly. Back to diversity, right? Diversity of opinion. Okay, so 15M, approved response to the grand jury report, is San Mateo County at risk of a large measles outbreak. Sean?
Oh,
I think Dr. Wade, if I can introduce Dr. Wade.
Absolutely. I've been leaning in for this. During 17-18, there were recent reports of measles outbreaks across the country. Because of the public health concerns, San Mateo County Superior Court filed a report in 18-19 after talking with folks and looking at the data and interviewing superintendents of all things. And they have filed a report, and the report is included in your packet this evening. We are required to both inform you of this report and ask that you accept and approve the response that we have prepared. We ask County Council to partner with us in our response. For many of the items, we are in agreement with what the grand jury has asked of us. There are a couple of things that we'll do differently. We were not of concern in terms of our vaccination rates in Cabrillo. It was not something that we were noticed of, but we will bring to the board any concerns regarding vaccination rates in the future. Happy to answer any questions.
Motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
I think Mary Beth technically said it first this time. So Mary Beth second. Questions or comments? Seeing as there are no.
What is the rate at which you'd be concerned?
I think the report talks a little bit about unvaccinated students, for instance, at home, unvaccinated adults, and pockets of unvaccinated folks that cause concern where students might be at risk. So in here, I think the rate that in San Mateo County, we exceeded the 93% of immunity levels. So that is what they're looking for, is that rate. I don't know any more detail than that, but I could get it for you.
Just for the public to know, you can find out all this immunization data, which is fascinating, on EdSource data. And we do very well in this county and in this district. We do very well with our immunizations, which, if you believe in herd immunity, is a good thing. There are other schools that, are anti-vaxxers, so they don't do so well. And San Mateo County grand jury really wants to make sure that we don't have a measles outbreak.
If there are no further questions or comments, we'll move to vote. And this will be en masse vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes 5 + 1 to 0. Thank you. All right. 15N, approve Cabrillo Unified School District Governing Board policy updates and adopt the proposed revisions as recommended by the California School Boards Association. Sean.
So if I can introduce this, and if there are any questions, I may hand it over to my colleagues. But there are 3 board policies that are coming forward to you. California School Boards Association usually updates policies. We update policies upon their recommendation when there are changes in law. One is an equity policy. We feel this policy is very important, especially considering the discussions we've been having tonight and in future past board meetings, where we're looking at really spending resources, attaching resources to those most in need, and doing right by our actions, we think that's an important policy to adopt at this point, and I think it is a new policy for this district. And would guide Dr. Wade's and Dr. Patia's work going forward about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And by the way, there is a new web page for diversity and equity on the to gather these kinds of motions that the board are doing now. The second policy is on high school graduation requirements. We are not changing the high school graduation requirements currently. We're not proposing that. But this does allow for diplomas to be granted to people per legal reasons, per recommendations of the state, whether they be because of immigration status, military, terminal illness, et cetera, et cetera. And the third one, school health services, as I understand it, is just a very small updating of a policy that allows us the ability to get Medi-Cal dollars, or, yes, thank you for nodding. I always think about it as MA, but I don't know what that means, but it's Medi-Cal of some sort. So if there are any questions, my colleagues could help deep dive, but we recommend, staff recommends approval.
Motion to approve? Second? Okay. Questions or comments? All right, we'll move to vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes 5+1 to 0. All right. Item 16, future board agenda items. We'll have the enrollment report debut back in. Approval of the Williams Uniform Complaint Report, approval of Cabrillo Unified School District Governing Board policy updates, and adopt the proposed revisions as recommended by the CSBA. Sean also referred earlier to approval of the governance handbook. And future item 17, future events, dates, and requests, September 15th to October 15th, so starting this Sunday. Also as referred to earlier, Cabrillo USD Hispanic Heritage Month, September 30th to October 4th. Elementary goal setting conferences in Cunha Outdoor Education Week. October 1st, Big Lift Collaborative Meeting, District Office Boardroom. October 1st, also Chamber Education Committee Meeting, also here. October 9th, 8th grade open house, Half Moon Bay High School. And October 10th, our next regular governing board meeting. So, and, yes.
November meeting, do we need to discuss?
Can we just
do that? Do we change dates offline, or do we need to discuss it during the meeting?
The question is, do we change dates offline for a regularly scheduled board meeting, or do we do that in a public meeting? And I guess you can kind of see that I snuck that into a public meeting tonight. It is not agendized for action. If the board would like me to direct that, to bring that back for action in October so that you could change your regularly scheduled board agenda to accommodate so we could know the results of a parcel tax election, staff would be happy to bring that back as October.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand it though, because we won't actually know for 30 days.
True.
We'll have a better sense in 2 weeks than we will in 1 week, most likely. But more likely, data usually comes in over time. Plus, Kimberly definitely can't be at that meeting on November 7th.
I'll work travel, I
So-
cannot be here the first 2 weeks.
Well, I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think it's actually both.
I just don't, not sure that we'll know that, depending on how close it is.
We may or may not, but we're more likely to know more later than we are sooner.
Because
We
I
won't
want-
know within 2 days for sure.
Because I wanted to belt and suspender it, to use the legal term, and really cover ourselves, I brought it up in this meeting. Now you're discussing it as future agenda items. Staff would be happy to bring this back as a action item at the next board meeting, so you can decide whether or not you want to postpone the meeting or not. I see the merits either way.
That'd be great.
I do want to also remind people that when people cannot be at a board meeting, they can call in. You can list an address and call in, so that's something we may be doing in future meetings, but nonetheless, we can bring it back. I can certainly agendize that with the board president per our policies.
Very good. Okay, so we will, I think, take you up with that offer to bring it to the next agenda item and maybe have some coordination in the meantime to see what those dates would be. Okay, item 18, return to closed session if necessary. We agreed in the first part of our closed session, we will do that, and then we will adjourn at that time. So I guess we don't need to adjourn now, so we will complete this part of the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
And thank you for staying here.
Yeah.